водою, по широкій тисі пропливав, по границях хвилею крутою, від Карпатська буйна голова, по границях хвилею крутою, від Карпатська буйна голова. Бились хлопці кустові на славу, полягли в нерівному бою за свою омріяну державу, січовую воленьку свою, за свою омріяну державу, січовую воленьку свою. До тихого Дунаю, мов натурка браття в байдаках, синя хвиля жалібно гойдає, течія показує їм шлях. Буде скрізь, та не звороти горю, ні братів, ні в дусі матері. Чорне море, українське море, зустрічай своїх богатирів. Чорне море, українське море, зустрічай своїх богатирів.
Ось наша славна Україна зажурилася, а ми тою червону калину підіймемо, а ми нашу славну Україну гей розвеселимо, а ми тою червону калину підіймемо, а ми нашу славну Україну гей розвеселимо. Золотистий лан, розпочали стрільці січові з ворогами там. А ми тою ярою пшеницю відберемо, а ми нашу славну Україну гей розвеселимо. А ми тою ярою пшеницю відберемо, а ми нашу славну
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптя посорбати довбані щі, та трохи у щах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Зі сходу припхались до нас барани, для восстановлення великої страни, найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи, всяке озброєння, різне, ракети, потужні машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, і ми зачаїли на орків образу, з бандитів російських робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, на вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто ж винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає їх цар.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
Hello, everybody.
And today we are here to report the Day 87 news. Another day has passed in Ukraine, and with it, another 24 hours of the war. The Ukrainians were not supposed to survive the first 3 days, and so, just by their country surviving another day, they have once again survived 33% of the total time Western analysts said they were supposed to survive when the war first started. So once again, incredibly impressive that they're still holding on and in fact fighting incredibly well, although we do have some information today south of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, in this area in particular, that is showing some very dangerous signs. The Ukrainians do have the situation under control and are trying to curb the breakthrough that has occurred in this area, but we will cover that later on in the news. So, without further ado, let's go over the schedule for tonight, and let's see what we've got. We're actually going to be going around things in reverse tonight as far as international news. Instead of it being covered last, international news is going to be covered first, just because we have a very low amount of it. We'll be covering the news here in the United States, the news we've gotten in Poland, and we'll also be covering the Russian news as well that we've gotten in St. Petersburg and Moscow, as interesting instances have been popping up around the world, and they are showing that there's a large amount of support for Ukraine within Russia and still around the world. We'll then be moving back into Ukraine and covering the location unknowns. We have a pretty decent amount of them today, around 16 of them, so it's going to be one of the lengthier segments of tonight's stream. Also, I forgot to mention, we will actually be answering 3 questions from the chat before we move on from the international news to the location unknowns. Once we cover the location unknown news, we're then going to be moving to the Kharkiv region. We don't have any news from there today, but that will be the kind of rotation that we're moving down the front with. We'll be going from Kharkiv down towards Mariupol, and then once we answer those questions, we'll move on to the Kharkiv area, go over the rest of the news that we've gotten around Severodonetsk and Popasna in particular. That has been a flashpoint on the front line today, and I highly suggest y'all take a look at this because the actual situation here could get very rough if the Russians continue their breakthrough and the Ukrainians cannot manage to stabilize the front within the next few days. We'll then be moving on down the front towards the area of Donetsk. We have a very small amount of news from there today, and then we'll be going over a little bit of news left from Mariupol. The fact that the Ukrainians may still be in the Azovstal is something that is starting to be debated in my mind, because while there are still videos and footage coming out from there, and unfortunately I couldn't find one today that I saw earlier, and it was of a soldier using a 1910 Maxim gun inside of the Azovstal factory, they are still in there as far as I can tell by video evidence, although the Russians are saying that every single one of them has surrendered. And of course the Russians have an incentive to say that, but we will go over that later as well once we get to that part of the news. Finally, we'll be going over the news we have in Kherson, Mykolaiv, and Odessa, the holy trinity of the remainder of the Ukrainian west coast that is under contention right now by the Russian and Ukrainians. And then finally, we'll be wrapping up tonight's news with a speech from the man, the myth, the legend himself, President Volodymyr Zelensky. Of course, I'd like to let it be known to everyone that I am actually still trying to find a way to bring him on stream, and while that does seem to be a very daunting and challenging goal, I have never let that dissuade me before, and I am going to try my best to see if I can get this legendary and historic figure on our stream to hopefully help out with one of our Sunday fundraisers, maybe United 24, but not giving anything away, but that's kind of the one we're targeting for tomorrow. Kind of gave it all away right there. But anyways, let's get to the news. Starting off in the United States with some very important news about the Lend-Lease. We've actually heard that Patriot missile defense systems will be on the way to Ukraine. This will also be accompanied, I believe, by M142 HIMARS MLRS systems that just yesterday we were told were not going to be going to Ukraine. There's appeared to have been a reversal, and it does seem that those will be heading to Ukraine as well. Massive news for the Ukrainians, as the Patriot missile defense system is one of the most advanced missile defense systems around the world. Just for y'all to get an idea of how competent these systems are, Patriot missile defense systems, theoretically, although I don't believe it's actually been tested in practice, can shoot down intercontinental ballistic missiles that are on a trajectory over the Arctic Circle. Just to give you all an idea of how good these can be. So, it's very good to know that we'll be sending these to Ukraine. I believe that the Israelis are still trying to send their Iron Dome system to Ukraine, although we haven't had any more follow-up news as of late about the progress of those actually being delivered to Ukraine. One can only hope that they will get there, because that will help to defend Ukraine's major cities from these Russian barbaric attacks that they continuously conduct on the civilian populations all around Ukraine. We'll now be moving across the seas, once again, still United States news as far as what the United States is doing, and we're going to go to the airport of Rizhal, where today we've seen an M777, well, 4 M777s inside of a C-17. I'm getting everything messed up there. Sorry about that, y'all. But here we can see in this picture how many M777s you can fit in a C-17, and the answer is a lot more than you would think. Based off of this picture, you can actually see 6 M777s stacked one on top of the other inside of the C-17 being transported to Ukraine. Going off of this number, we can assume fairly safely that it would take around 15 C-17s to fly over the total amount of M777s that we have pledged to Ukraine's defense. So you can get the idea that the logistical feat of actually bringing those things over there is actually much smaller than I anticipated. I thought that a C-17 could maybe carry 4, maybe 2, but 6 was a very high number, something I didn't expect, and that makes the logistics of actually getting those over there a lot simpler as far as the United States is concerned. Getting them to the actual front lines in Ukraine, I'm not really sure about that. The Ukrainian government keeps their logistical operations top secret pretty much. No one really knows how they're operating except for the highest up command in the Ukrainian army. So unfortunately, I can't really go into exact detail about how the Ukrainians get these pieces to the front line. But we know they do because we're seeing a large amount of M777 activity on the front lines as of late. So once again, incredible news that the United States is still continuously providing vital support to Ukraine's defense and ensuring that they can take the fight to the Russians and even push them back in some areas. We're now going to be heading to the city of St. Petersburg, Russia's second largest city in the Russian Federation. Here today, we can actually see that there is still a massive amount of anti-war sentiments within Russia, as a massive crowd at a concert today in the city of St. Petersburg started to scream out anti-war slogans. Here's the video of this occurring. Oh man, just got black holed. We're gonna go hop over to Twitter real quick and take a look at that video a little bit better. Here's the video. And now the video loops, but you can see that this entire crowd is united in chanting out these anti-war slogans. And until now, until the past week or so, it's been largely believed that the majority of Russians believe in this war wholeheartedly and think that the Ukrainians are on the right side. At least that's what the video evidence we've been getting has been leading us to. But as this past week and a half has been going on, we keep on getting more and more news and information out of Russia. It's starting to seem like there is still a massive amount of the Russian population that is not into this war at all, and we can see that visibly here at this concert, where the entire crowd is unanimously chanting the anti-war slogans. We also saw a large singer in Russia the other day saying statements against the war, and he was subsequently arrested for his statements because they were considered defamation of the Russian armed forces, which is a crime inside of Russia. Very interesting, and just for y'all to get an idea of how free Russia is, free speech does not exist in any means inside of Russia. We're now going to be moving down to the area of Moscow, where today we've seen another important and crucially critical damage to the Russian military defense, well, the defense industry, better way to say that, near Moscow. In the city of Zhukovsky, I believe is how it's pronounced, we can see that a missile development plant caught on fire today and was burning out of control. Based off of this plume, we can assume that most of the building, if not a large part of it, has caught on fire, and there's most likely major damage being done to the missile development programs of the Russian Federation as we watch this fire burn. Incredibly interesting to see, and I do hope that these kinds of sabotage attacks that we continue to see at one after the other but over several days are actually causing massive impacts on Russia's defense and also their future developments of defense systems or the production of those systems, if that's even possible. We have an idea that Russia has generally halted production on all arms and equipment for the Russian army because of the sanctions, which have pretty much blocked out all of the resources they need to carry on this war. So they're really just operating this war off of, I guess you could say, borrowed time. As long as they have the resources they originally started off the war with, they can keep fighting. With that, we have now reached the end of the United States news, which is the international news for the day, and also the Russian news. So before we move on to the location unknowns, which we have a huge amount of, and I highly suggest y'all stick around. There's been some interesting clips in there today that are pretty rare, and some of them never before seen. We're going to go to a 3-question segment, answer those questions, and then we're going to move on to the location unknowns. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so good evening, everybody, again. As always, it's Enforcer Matt. First off, before we move to the questions, I want to thank everybody for the tremendous support. Y'all loved the Mr. Lunchtime merch, and we appreciate everybody getting one, and we hope you do enjoy your new merch. So moving on to the first question we have a $150 donation from James Nyland, who says, could you please use half for channel and other half for the next donation day? We can't donate in Australia and Slava, Ukraine.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. Of course, the support is greatly appreciated, and it does help our channel go a much longer way, and it helps us to keep on doing this. So thank you once again. To answer that question, yes, I'll make sure that half of that. So let me make sure to make a note on my phone real quick, so everyone hang on, because I want to make sure not to forget. But let me make sure to put down that 75 plus 100 for tomorrow's fundraiser. All right, so let me make sure to put that down as tomorrow at late in the day. We'll be doing that around there. And so done. All right, and so we got the note down, and I do thank you very much for the support. We'll make sure to add that into my chip-in on the Sunday night fundraisers. I always chip in $100, and since you've added in $75 additional dollars, my total will be going up to $175. So if anyone's preparing to match me tomorrow, just know it's now $175. With that, I thank you so much for the support once again, James Nyland, and I hate that Australians cannot donate. It's something with YouTube. It's not with us. It's with YouTube itself, and we are trying to figure out why that is the case. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Raphael Schneis or Schneis. I forgot how to pronounce it. They told me how to last time, but I can't remember. It's a very complicated last name. But anyways, hopefully forgive me, Raphael. So the question is, there's a lot of rivers in Ukraine. I was wondering if it would be possible for Ukraine to build river boats, like a sloop of war / armored gunboat with artillery to support the infantry. I've been watching since day 21, and God bless.
Well, I thank you so much for the support. And this is why, just in case if people are hanging around, they usually don't hang around in the question segments. This is why I highly recommend hanging around in the question segments, because this is a brand new question that's never been asked before, and it's an incredibly good one. So let's delve into it, and let's go off of what I know about what's currently going on in Ukraine. Ukraine does have a massive amount of rivers. The only large one in Ukraine is actually the Dnieper River, and the only reason for its wide size is because of the multiple dams and reservoirs that have been constructed along the entirety of its length. However, while it's the only major river in Ukraine, there are many other small ones. For example, the Severodonetsk River, which actually passes through Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, and also is the reason for the front line up here east of Kharkiv near Stary Salty and Pecheny. That's another somewhat sizable river within Ukraine. And riverboats are usually something that's used in lighter combat situations, but could be used here in the now. I believe that they wouldn't be sailing down the river straight up onto the Russians or anything like that. They would most likely be some kind of artillery gunboats, much like you would imagine during the American Civil War, where the Union Army constructed these flotillas of gunboats, which were literally just these like rafts with mortars on them, and they would sail them down the river close enough where they were in range of a town, and then they'd start bombarding it. I think that would most likely be what the Ukrainians would use, but at the same time, I think they would generally veer away from that just because they can do the same thing with artillery on land. So while it is a decent idea and it's a decent doctrine, I think the Ukrainians will most likely stick to something they have right now, which is a large amount of towed artillery and MLRS systems, instead of trying to build boats, because that could take some time and tie up some resources that they could be using elsewhere. But I do thank you so much for the support. It's a very interesting idea, and I like the suggestion of it. That's a really cool one, and I wish we had a lot of creative people like you in here, because that was a very interesting question and idea. And once again, I could be wrong. The Ukrainians may be looking into making some kind of flotilla of gunboats to travel up and down these rivers. I'm not entirely sure. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to move on to the location unknowns.
So the last one of this segment goes to Walker Scott, who puts in a $50 donation and says, I love the stream and Semper Fi.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. It's wonderful to hear that we have a Marine in the house. We have a lot of veterans in here, actually, which was surprising to me. 25% of our viewers are veterans, and I just find that to be such a high honor that me with no military experience, and some people are going, what? He has no military experience? That's right. I have no military experience. Everything I do is based off of historical precedent. So imagine as like an attorney, if you've ever heard of common law, where an attorney will, come up with case law from before, and they'll be like, well, this exact same thing happened like 60 years ago, and the judge ruled this way, so you need to rule this way in this case. That's kind of what I do here. I go through history, and I go, well, in this exact same situation about 80 years ago, this happened, and that's how I base all of my analysis. So apparently that actually is something that rings true with a lot of veterans. Apparently they believe that the analysis is pretty well on, and I've also garnered the support of people like the Funker 530 team, and other channels. And of course, it's always wonderful to know that I'm not just yapping on about nothing, and it actually has a little bit of a basis to it. So I thank you so much for the support once again. It helps out this channel a lot, and I'm glad that you do find it worthwhile to help us to continue on with our streams. So thank you once again, and Semper Fi. With that, we've reached the end of this question segment. We're now going to move on into the location unknowns, and stick around because the information down here near Popasna is crucially important. I would say the least. This is starting to look a little bit questionable. I have talked with Starsky today, who has loads of information. He's a treasure trove of information, but unfortunately some of the stuff we discussed cannot be discussed on stream. So I'll be trying to discuss as much as I can, but I can't talk about too much. So we're now going to be moving on to the location unknowns, but I highly suggest y'all stick around for the Popasna talk. So with that, starting off the first bit of news in our location unknowns, we can see the Ukrainians shooting down another Orlan 10. We're starting to see that Orlan 10s are being used in a larger amount as this week has gone on. This is suggesting to me that the Russians are using these drones to try and collect reconnaissance on Ukrainian troop locations and movements, so that way they can better prepare their offensives or pushes into Ukrainian territory. It seems like the Russians are once again gearing up for an offensive across the entirety of the front, as their units have now rested and maybe have been able to build up a supply cache capable of pushing another Russian offensive at least for some time. In the next bit of location unknown news, we can see that the Ukrainians have a 50 caliber M2 machine gun. We have not seen one of these over the course of the war yet, and it is great to see that one of John Browning's wonderful creations — John Browning is one of the best gun designers in history — it's good to see that one of his creations is being used out there on the front. So with that, here's the video. I have to mute it because it does have copyrighted music. But you can see here the M250 caliber. I've shot one of these before, and I have to say, it is an impressive machine gun. You wouldn't believe it, but a 50 caliber actually has a large amount of I guess you could call it a shockwave. When it fires, it makes your entire face shake, and it feels like your bones are rattling apart. It's an incredible experience. I'd highly suggest, if you ever get the chance to stand around one of these when they're being fired, I would highly suggest it. It's something you'll never forget, and it's a really cool experience. We can see them laying in the fire on this 50 cal. Of course, the 50 cal has been in service since the dawn of time, pretty much, since the beginning of, I guess you could say, American world dominance, I guess you could say. Not like world dominance as we took the whole thing over, but world dominance as a superpower. This thing's been around the entire time, and it shows no signs of going away anytime soon. And an incredible machine, and I have to say, I'm a huge fan of the M2 50 caliber machine gun. Now you see the 50 cal, an interesting bit of history is that when the 50 cal was introduced into service, there was no other gun like it of that size. And so the machine guns in World War I, like the Vickers and the Maxim, which we've seen being used, well, we've seen the Maxim being used in this war a little bit, which were called heavy machine guns then, were so small in comparison to the 50 cal and the Dishka, which then was produced later by the Soviet Union, that those machine guns got bumped down into the medium machine gun category. It's a funny story, but it's really impressive to think that American arms are starting to arrive in mass in Ukraine, and we're starting to see even more of them, like this 50 caliber M2, being used on the front lines, and hopefully giving the Ukrainians a good PR about American weapons, their quality, and their abilities. We're now going to be moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can once again see another great American wonder, the M777, in use. Once again, I always have to give credit to the British for designing this piece, because there is a load of British people that watch this channel, and they go nuts if I don't mention this thing was British design. And of course, you have to give them the kudos, because this is an incredible piece. Here we can see them preparing the piece to fire. We can now see them fire the piece. And we can now see them moving. I call this the ramrod forward. I'm sure there's a more technical term for it. I'm trying to think of what it's called in Civil War terms. I just can't think of it right now, though, so sorry about that if I got ramrod wrong, but that's what I'm going to call it. We can now see them preparing to put the shell into the breech, and then afterwards they'll be putting in the propellant. We can now see them putting in the shell itself. We can now see the next gunner moving forward with the propellant and pushing that into the breech as well. They then will close the breech and prepare the piece to fire again. Hopefully those two shots we saw on film landed directly onto Russian units. Of course, they could be conducting ranging shots at this moment. That may be the case, but still, always want to remain hopeful, and we do know that the M777 has greatly bolstered Ukraine's artillery abilities over the past 2 weeks of this war. With that, we're going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Russians getting some cardio. I believe that there may have been a washing machine available in this dugout here, because we can see them all running towards it. Just look at them. It's like someone said, hey, free washing machine, it's a Maytag, and they all came out of the woods and they're running straight into that bunker. Suffice it to say, I think the Ukrainians are coming up with more creative booby traps these days, because while they said there was a Maytag washing machine in there, I don't believe there is, because right after all of them get in this hidey hole, it looks like it got hit. So it looks like a large amount of Russian infantry may have been wiped out in that one situation. And hopefully that will help the Ukrainians hold the line or push a counterattack wherever this was. Unfortunately, it wasn't a location unknown, so we don't know exactly where. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Stugna wiping out an MTLB. You can actually see some infantry on top of this MTLB. I do have to keep it muted. It does have copyrighted music. We can now see the Stugna on the way. And what's interesting about this system, and I think this is important to point out, is that we've seen over the course of this war multiple different interfaces for the Stugna system. We've seen one in English. We've seen one in Cyrillic. Well, actually, one in the Latin alphabet, one in Cyrillic. Then we've seen one in the Arabic alphabet. And now finally we're seeing a new interface that doesn't have to do with the actual inscriptions and writing on it, but now it has to do with the color gradient. Now we can see that this one's in a grayscale gradient. So I don't know if this is one of the older versions of the Stugnas, or if this is what they've been moving towards during the war, trying to pump them out quicker. I'm not really sure, but this one is in a grayscale, I guess you could say, display, which is very interesting. We haven't seen many of these until yesterday. So we can now see the Stugna still on the way towards the MTLB, loaded with infantry, probably infantry on the inside and also on top, and doesn't look like any of them will be making it to the front lines. So with that, that's the end of this video, but you can see right there clearly that the Ukrainians have once again probably wiped out maybe a platoon or even more of Russian infantry in this one attack on this MTLB. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Russians begin charity marathons. Much like this stream runs Sunday night fundraisers, make sure to come tomorrow. It's going to be a huge event. Starsky and Funker, well, Ronnie Fit from Funker 530 will be on at the same time. We can see here that the Russians also are getting in the charity spirit. As Ukrainian artillery begins to land around these vehicles, they decide it's a perfect time to begin a charity run for Doctors Without Borders. So we can see these two, what appears to be BTRs sitting on the side of the road. The first shell will land right up here at the top side of the screen. The Russians have now decided that that is the starting pistol for the marathon, and they all begin their run on the 10K. We can now see them all starting off. We can see that we have a little Usain Bolt up there as he is already in first place, and it looks like he's hightailing it faster than everyone else. Look at him. He's keeping that lead. We need to watch out for him because with those kinds of running abilities, the Russians will give him some juice and put him in the next Olympics. So, of course, great to see. We now see the Ukrainians may have come up with a new strategy for capturing Russian vehicles. And I've seen some people joke about this today, and I was thinking, what if this is actually the case? This is a little far-fetched to me, but hear me out, because it's actually kind of smart if this is the case. The Ukrainians may have intentionally missed these armored personnel carriers because they knew the Russians' first inclination would be to run when under fire. And so the crews abandon the vehicles, and then the Ukrainians can just roll up with some support and then capture these armored personnel carriers and use them for themselves. I think that's something that could happen. We've seen that a lot. You know, that's usually how Russian vehicles are captured. And that may have been the strategy that was going here. So it may have not actually been the Ukrainians' intentions to hit the vehicles, but just hit near them so that way they could capture them later. So very interesting, and I hope that that man who was leading the front of the pack running off does get into the Olympics, so that way they can't even play in the Russian team because they've been juicing so much. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see two Ukrainian scouts outrunning a Russian drone. Of course, being tracked, well, it was deleted, so unfortunately we won't be able to see that one. We're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a Stugna attack. Once again, in full fashion, the Ukrainians are whipping out the best, the old reliable, and knocking out another Russian vehicle. We can now see that the Stugna has fired and is traveling on its way. Stugna videos are very much like each other. They're all nearly the same, but it's always good to see them, and it is always hardcore and undeniable proof that the Ukrainians are knocking out Russian vehicles each day of the war, as each one of these Stugna hits, much like this one right here, does show another vehicle knocked out today that we can verify on film. We're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a BMP hit by artillery. This BMP appeared to not have a good day, and it looks like the Ukrainians may have ended its very long life in the Russian military. This thing's probably 30 years old, with a very well-placed artillery shot. Here we can see the tree line where this BMP is resting. You can also see a large amount of pop marks in the fields, and before I allow this video to continue, Operator Starsky actually shared some very interesting information with me to suggest why there already may be pop marks in this field. The Russians pushed the same objective over and over and over. And so whenever, I'm going to back out of this video to give an example, whenever you see near Avdiivka, for example, which is down here, that the Russians barrage the city, attack it, and then they get repulsed, what's insane about that is that when they get repulsed, they try again down the exact same road with the exact same number of forces, and they do the exact same strategy over. And so the Ukrainians hit them with artillery the first time, they hit them with artillery the second time, and the third time, and the fourth time. And so you see these massive amounts of pop marks and craters build up in the same area because the same battle is occurring each day. The Russians literally live Groundhog Day over and over and over in how they carry out these strategies. And it appears that they're doing the exact same thing in this clip based off of how many pop marks are in this field. We can now see the BMP go up in flames, and you can actually see a visible shockwave come off of it. Now the Ukrainians are of course getting a free fireworks show, which they're always appreciative of, and we can't ever thank the Russians enough for sending over these free firework poppers. You know, and they're free pretty much. All you have to do is spend a few $1,000s to light them up. And now we can see the BMP burning and having some small little explosions. I think as long as those explosions start to calm down a little bit and get tamed, the Ukrainians will most likely have a campfire and sing their campfire songs. That's the end of the video, but wonderful video to see nonetheless, as we do know another Russian BMP has been wiped out somewhere on the front lines. We're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see that a Ukrainian soldier was in a firefight. This is an interesting bit of footage. You can tell that it was done by a chest camera. And you can hear that there's a large firefight going on in the background. The soldier now runs forward into the fray. We hear him scream for a second, and now he turns around. Chambers the round. And then he starts firing backwards at the enemy. While While the firefight was intense, it's great to know that this man did survive because the video was uploaded by him, and so we know that the Ukrainians apparently got out of this firefight largely unscathed, or at least made it out. I'm not really sure what's happening here because it does sound like there is fire coming from this direction in the tree line, and we also saw him firing in the opposite direction, so I'm not sure if that was an ambush or what, but it was an interesting video to see, and it's a very rare instance of an actual firefight occurring on film. We don't see those often. On to the next bit of location unknown news, we can see a T-72B3, the Russian backbone of their armored force, being hit once again by Ukrainian artillery. Gotta wait for it to load. There we go. So now the video begins. And with it, we'll of course see some wonderful destruction of Russian forces. Here in this backyard, we can see that a Russian T-72B3 is just sitting around. We can also see a Russian tanker standing on the fender over the track, and now he's climbed onto the turret. It appears that he's now going to go into the commander's cupola, but I think that plan will be interrupted here very soon. Actually, we can see the commander getting out of the tank now. So this is the driver, because we can see his hatch open, and the loader, well no, I'm sorry, the gunner is still inside of the tank under his hatch. We can now see shells raining down near the location of the T-72B3. Once again, remember, that T-72B3 we just saw is right back there where my mouse cursor is. So this shell appears to have landed near another vehicle and may have hit it, although I can't really tell for certain. We can now see another shell land. This one certainly hit the BTR that was in the front side of the yard for this house. That one's now burning and smoldering. And you see that the fire crackles on, and of course, another Ukrainian artilleryman got his wings. It's wonderful to know. And also, wait a minute, hang on, correction. Apparently it wasn't a BTR. That was the T-72B3 that got hit. So I actually misidentified that one at the start of this clip. Let's go back and take a look at that again. Because I swear that thing looked like a BTR-82, didn't it? But I was definitely wrong. Nope. Yeah, you can see the turret. Yeah, that's a T-72B3. And it got smacked. And you can see it burning right there. It's always interesting how the Russians pick out the most conspicuous places to hang out. This looks like a very rich neighborhood. Look at the amount of land each house has. And this guy's got a whole swimming pool. Like it's a Olympic swimming pool. And it's got a tree-lined side to it. Very nice neighborhood. And you can see that it was destroyed. But still, the Russians pick the worst places to hang out, and the Ukrainians can pretty much just go where the washing machines are or where the affluent houses are. So once again, the Russians gave their positions away, got destroyed, and we know that the Ukrainians are all high-fiving behind the screen as those shells landed and destroyed those vehicles. We're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown News, where we can see a Czech RM-70 Tornado at work. An RM-70 Tornado is a Czech-modified Grad launching system, which is a little bit better than the normal Russian Grad, and we can see here that the Ukrainians are using one. The sound of the Grad has nearly become a synonymous noise with this war at this point. Both sides use MLRSs to an unbelievable degree. It's almost what their entire artillery units revolve around, but we can see that the Ukrainians are now switching towards towed artillery as their primary force. Still, this sound is almost completely recognizable. Like, you can recognize it in an instant for what it is. And it's good to know that the Ukrainians continue to be able to supply these forces because MLRSs require a large supply line to continue to function. And we can still see that the Ukrainians are using them in a large amount, which does tell us that their supply lines are healthy and in normal operation. We're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown News, where we can see the Ukrainians pass by 2 destroyed BMP-2s in a field. Let me get this up here real quick. We're going to have to mute it real quick, but as we can see, they're driving down this dirt road, and you can see the first BMP-2 destroyed on the side of the road, and then you can see the second one, which is missing the roof and really the entire back of the tank. Looks like that BMP-2 had some Taco Bell, if you know what I mean. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see some Ukrainian MiG-29s. We actually thought for a good while, at least I did, that the Ukrainian MiG-29s may have been out of the fight. We haven't seen footage of them since the first weeks of the war. But today, they made an appearance once again, and we can see that Ukrainian MiG-29s have taken back to the skies, and there is video footage today of those MiG-29s. Here they are on film. And it's wonderful to see that the aircraft that became incredibly famous at the beginning of this war because of the story of the Ghost of Kyiv has once again taken back to the skies. While we do know now that the Ghost of Kyiv story was something that was come up by a War Thunder YouTuber, it's still incredible to know that that incredibly famous aircraft at this point is still within Ukraine's hands and operational, and that a large enough portion of them were not destroyed by the Russians to leave the Ukrainians empty-handed. I hope that these MiG-29s are used to a great degree. We know that the Ukrainians have scored multiple air kills, somewhere around 209 aircraft at this point in the war, and hopefully these MiG-29s have contributed to that number. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a rare communications vehicle was captured. This communications vehicle is based off of the BTR-60 chassis, but we can see here that its designation is the R-145BM-1 Command and Communication Vehicle. We can see here that its tires were deflated, and the Russians' hopes of keeping this thing deflated with the tires. So here's the first picture of it, and here is the second picture of this command vehicle. We can see a Ukrainian soldier happily standing by their brand new prize, and hopefully the Ukrainians can find a new use for this vehicle, or at least gather some confidential or classified information from the inside of it that the Russians may have not been able to destroy soon enough, although I'm highly skeptical about that because the back does show some evidence of fire, which may indicate that the inside of the vehicle was burned to prevent any of that confidential information from falling into Ukrainian hands. A little bit of a bummer, but I think the Ukrainians will manage without it. They're doing a pretty good job in every part of the front line except for the area south of Popasna. But we will once again cover that, and everyone stick around for that because that's definitely going to be major news. We're now going to move on to the last bit of location unknown news we've got today, which is the ledger. We haven't had one of these in a long time, but I found a spreadsheet today, an infographic, that shows the current Russian losses as of May 21st. So bet everyone's salivating and chomping at the bits to know what kind of damage has the Ukrainian forces done to the Russians as of today. Well, here we have it. The Ukrainians have managed to completely kill, this isn't the wounded and killed figure, this is just a killed figure alone, 28,850 Russian personnel. This number is getting close to 30,000. And just for y'all to get an idea of how bad that is for the Russians, that is around 15% of their initial invasion force that has been straight up killed, and there's an untold number that we really can't assess well that's been wounded and taken out of this war as well. So somewhere around most likely 50% of their initial invasion force, as far as personnel goes, has been incapacitated and removed from this war. We can see here that the Ukrainians have claimed 204 Russian aircraft, a massive number. It's something like 15 to 16% of the entire Russian Air Force. We've seen that they've claimed another helicopter today, bringing the number up to 169. Nice. We can see that they've destroyed another 15 tanks today, bringing that number up to 1278. They're already a quarter of the way to the next 1,000 tanks destroyed. We assume at the moment that the Russians only have around 3,000 to 4,000 operational tanks within the entire army of the Russian Federation. They do have 12,000 tanks on paper, but thousands of those tanks are in Far East camps where they're no longer being used or maintained, and they're pretty much being left to rot. So the actual ability for those tanks to be operational and pushed into service is highly doubtful. We can see that 3,166 armored personnel vehicles have been destroyed. I believe that that number is combining both the armored cars and the armored personnel carriers at the same time. We've seen that another 26 of those have been destroyed today, a massive number. I'm not really exactly sure how many armored personnel carriers and armored vehicles the Russians have, but this number is certainly chipping away at it because not a lot of nations have 3,000 armored personnel carriers from the start anyways. We can see that 93 anti-aircraft warfare systems have been destroyed. Unfortunately, once again, I do not have an exact number of how many of these vehicles the Russians have, but I would assume that this is a sizable amount of them. Actually, let's see if we can get a number for that. Russian anti-air vehicle numbers. Let's see here. Oh, that just gives us the labeling. Let's go down and let's see if we can get some numbers here. How many pantsiers does the Russians have? They have 110. So I'm going to assume that their actual self-propelled anti-air units are actually sizable. So this number is pretty decent, but I don't believe it's really putting a dent into the Russian air defense forces as much as I would like to wish. So it's a good number. Hopefully they can pump that up a little bit higher, and I think they will be in the future. We can see that they've taken out 201 MLRSs, a pretty big number. We've seen that they've taken out 2,178 supply trucks and fuel trucks. Now that is a massive number, and that cannot be overstated. That means that the Ukrainians have wiped out over 50% at this point of the initial Russian logistics force that they entered this war with, and that logistics force was the entire one for the whole Russian army. So that means that the logistics forces around the rest of the country have been pulled in and were all in Ukraine at the start of this war, and the Ukrainians have managed to destroy half of those. So we know that Russian logistics have to be on the pain train at this point. We've seen that 43 special equipment vehicles have been destroyed, 596 artillery systems, that means towed artillery pieces, a pretty sizable and decent number. 462 drones have been destroyed, a pretty sizable number as well. 13 boats have been destroyed. Once again, rest in peace, Moscow. You will not be missed. And finally, 104 cruise missiles. The Ukrainians have managed to shoot down a sizable amount of them, although the Ukrainian anti-missile defense systems have been slightly weak, and hopefully those can be bolstered by the addition of the Iron Dome and Patriot missile systems to their portfolio. With that, that is the conclusion of the Location Unknown news today, and we can see that the Ukrainians are putting the hurt on the Russian military for sure. These numbers are massive, and of course this will be putting large gaps in the Russians' plans as they're taking more losses than anyone would have expected. At this point, they've taken, I believe, I think it's something like 60% of the losses the United States endured during the entire Vietnam War, which was around, let me make sure I get the number right on that. It's like 17 years. Vietnam War length. It lasted 10 years. I consider the I Drang the beginning of the Vietnam War for the United States. That happened in 1965, and then the last American forces, for the large part, withdrew in 1973. So, according to my figures, it's like 8 years or so. But still, we lost 50,000 men over 8 years. The Russians have managed to lose nearly 30,000 over 3 months. That gives you a pretty good idea of how badly this war is going for the Russians in terms of losses. With that, we've now reached the end of the Location Unknown news, and we're now going to start moving on to the rest of the news for the day, where this will include Kharkiv, Severodonetsk, the Popasna area near Bakhmut, Luhansk, Donetsk, Mariupol, and also the western seaboard of Ukraine. Well, the southwestern seaboard. But before we move to those, everyone bear with us because I think we have some incredible questions lined up for the night. We're going to answer 3 questions from the chat, and then we're going to move on to the Kharkiv news and also the rest of the news from around the country. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right. So first up, we have a $45 donation from MO, who says, does the Russian military have a penalty for soldiers who abandon their BMPs?
Could you reread that one for me real quick so I can collect my thought on
that? Does the Russian military have a penalty for soldiers who abandon their BMPs?
I'm not really sure if they do. I wouldn't think so, because if they did, then that would probably just lead to higher losses, but at the same time, the Russians work backwards, and so they may actually have some kind of system to discipline them. I'm not really sure about Russian discipline. It's incredibly harsh compared to Western standards. Like the Russians, in the United States, hazing on paper in the military, although I'm sure a lot of veterans have experience with hazing. I've heard a lot of stories about it. On paper, it's not allowed. In the Russian army, hazing is considered normal and is encouraged still, and it's pretty insane hazing sometimes from the stories I've heard. So I assume they have some kind of punishment for it, but I'm not really sure what it would be. But I do thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question, at least to some degree. At least I can kind of give a context to maybe base an answer off of, considering that the Russians do have a very cruel disciplinary system. And with that, we're on to the next question.
All right, and moving on to the next one, we have a $20 donation from D. Shaw, and he does not leave a comment. But thank you very much, D. Shaw, for your support. It is very much appreciated. And moving on to our final question of the segment, which goes to Chris Mack, who puts in a $20 donation and says, this is a quote, by the way, "Failing to continue to support Ukraine would be like paying a cannibal to eat us last," said a U.S. politician.
Whoever that U.S. politician was, they have a pretty good
I meant
assessment.
Romney, excuse me.
Oh, well, not to pick political sides. Everyone knows that I don't pick political sides, but that statement is actually pretty true. And I think that a lot of people still forget. And I saw something come out from CNN today, and golly, don't watch CNN, y'all. They even now they paint pictures that aren't true historically, but I believe that that's entirely true, 100%. What that politician in particular said today. It's a very good quote. Pretty much, what we're doing right now, well, what we would be doing if we allowed Russia to invade and did nothing about it, is that we would pretty much be hoping, much like in World War II, well, hopefully this will be the last country that Hitler will annex or do anything like that to. And that would be the general principle we'd be running under. And I know a lot of people have fallen into that mindset today, but at the same time, this group of people who have fallen into that mindset today are the same group of people who sit there and say, oh my God, I can't believe that all of Europe just allowed this tyrannical maniac in Germany to run around and annex all of these countries, and they didn't stop him at the start. Like, how in the world could they do that? How in the world did World War II happen and it wasn't stopped? How in the world did the Holocaust happen? And these people have all of these questions, but at the same time, they're the kind of people who don't take a stand in the modern world when that stuff is happening right before their eyes, and world governments have an ability to actually step in and try and stop it. So I believe that is perfectly on point. And when you put it into historical context, it's better for us to step up now and provide arms of support and clearly give our political and diplomatic support to this cause, instead of trying to hope that it will subside and, just disappear. It won't. We already know that the Russians, well, at least Putin, has like a Mein Kampf plan to reclaim the Baltic states and also parts of Poland as well, and maybe even Finland, considering that it was part of the Russian Empire, but I haven't really heard that being stated as much as the Baltics and Poland. And a lot of people want to think that Putin has grandeur ideas of bringing back the Soviet Union, but I want everyone to remember, the Soviet Union never actually controlled parts of Poland, rather than under the Molotov-Ribbentrop Act in 1939, where they claimed half of Poland in a joint invasion with Germany. So beyond that, they never actually controlled any parts of Poland. The parts of Poland that were controlled under Russia's history were controlled by the Russian Empire, and I think that's starting to lead into Putin believing that he's the next Tsar. I mean, like, look at the imagery of the Russian Federation right now. Russian eagle. Let's look at this. See this? This double-headed eagle? This is the exact same symbol, I believe, of the Romanov dynasty. Let me make sure I've got the symbology correct here. Eagle. And you can see here, when you type that in, you get the exact same eagle. Of course, I believe this one may be for the Grand Duchy of Moscow. I believe that's actually the crest that's in that one. But still, you can get the idea that it's literally the same eagle. I mean, like, the imagery and the ideas of Russia today is pretty much not Putin wanting to bring back the Soviet Union. He's wanting to bring back the Russian Empire and be its next czar, which is insane to me. And also, another thing that will back that up, and I believe y'all will agree with me here, is Putin, the Kremlin Guard. Let me make sure that I'm thinking of the right unit here. They were created in, like, 2004. There they are. Yes, this is it. These uniforms use shakos. You know the last time these kinds of this kind of headwear in uniform was used? While it does have some Soviet influences on it, the answer is this is mostly like Russian Empire kind of attire. And this is once again leading into that idea that he's thinking that he's some kind of new czar for Russia, which it's insane really when you think about it. He's literally having these massive narcissistic binges on his own where he thinks he'll be the next czar. Of course, Russia is as weak now as they were back then. You've got to remember they did get beasted on by the British and the French, as well as the Ottomans in the Crimean War, which was insane and hilarious. And the British were still fighting incredibly incompetently at the time, as well as the French. They had no plan, and they still managed to beat the Russians somehow. So a very interesting story, but yes, I do believe that U.S. politician's statement was dead on the nail. And so with that, did we answer 3 questions there? Was that the 3rd question, Matthew?
I believe so.
All right, and with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that did address the question pretty well, and we're going to cut off this question segment here. If you did throw in a super chat, don't worry, we'll answer all of those, and we will answer some questions from the live chat. I don't want anyone to ever think that they actually always have to pay to get their question answered. Just know that because there's so many super chats, it makes it really hard to get to live chat questions sometimes. But I do thank everyone for the support. Y'all's support continues to help my channel run, and if without it, it wouldn't be able to run because I wouldn't be able to support myself. And so with that, we've reached the end of this question segment, and we're now going to move into the area around Kharkiv. We've got no news from the area around Kharkiv today. We do know that the Ukrainians are still conducting counterattacks in this area against this Russian pocket, but we have no idea how well these counterattacks are going. So unfortunately, we won't be able to report on that today, but we do know, at last we heard, the Ukrainians were still being met with success and had liberated another village, at least one other village in this area. We don't know which one. Moving on down the front, we've gotten no reports of action down the length of the Severodonetsk reservoir from Vovchansk all the way down to Pachinihi. Moving further beyond that, we've gotten no reports of news or activity from the areas around Izium. It seems that area has fallen somewhat quiet today, but in the town of Severodonetsk, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correct, I feel like I didn't, today we've seen that the Russians bombed a music school. There's actually a little bit of an interesting history behind this music school. This music school was made under a joint nonprofit run by the United States, the Japanese, and one other country. I forgot which one it was. But they all came together and built this music school in this town in Ukraine as kind of like a joint sign of like friendship with the Ukrainian people, and the Russians managed to obliterate the thing. Here's the video of the subsequent destruction of the school. So it's unfortunately, it's of course unfortunate to see that the School of Music is once again, well, has been destroyed in the first place. We do know that the Russians continue to attack civilian infrastructure without regard to life or the innocence of civilians, and so hopefully the Russians that did attempt and commit to this barrage and destruction of this music school will be held accountable for their crimes, especially if there were any civilians that were killed in this attack. We're not really sure about that, and that's all the news we've gotten from the Izium area as of today, is just a lone artillery barrage on a town that's pretty far behind the lines. Also, they have some kind of cave monastery here, and I was very interested in what that is, because we're going to actually look at that on Google Maps, because I would like to know if that is the cave monastery I heard about a while ago. Actually, let me type in Ukraine first, so that way it'll pull it up on Google Maps. So that way I don't show my location on Google Maps. I don't want people coming and killing me. So let's go down to Izium. We're going to go down here, and I want to see if this is the cave monastery. Oh my god, it is! Wow, that's nuts. This is actually a cave monastery that we heard about a while ago, and the Russians had barraged this city then, and this monastery had taken a little bit of damage. It's a very neat looking place. It's very cool. Let me show y'all some pictures of it. This place was built in the 1650s, and it's a monastery on a cave. So this means that some kind of monks, if I'm following what I know off of the Catholic faith, this is of course Eastern Orthodox, monks lived in monasteries. They pretty much dedicate their lives to the Lord, pretty much, and trying to live as holy as possible. They usually, according to the Catholic faith, do not have any personal possessions, or if they do, they're very little and only the necessary kind of possessions. And you can see here that this is an impressive building, a very historic one, and for sure a wonderful testament to classic, I guess you could call it, Ukrainian architecture. So wonderful to see. Hopefully it doesn't get destroyed or damaged throughout this war, because it is certainly a historic site. We're now going to move on beyond this area around Izium and Liman, and we're now going to move to the area of Kreminna, where today we've seen an R-18 drone destroy a BMP. Here's the video. Of course, I can't unmute it. It has copyrighted music. But here you can see a BMP-2 sitting in the side of a field. And we can now see the drone drop a bomblet on it. And looks like it got it right on the rear of the vehicle. The fuel tank for the BMP-2 is actually sandwiched right in the middle of the crew compartment. Well, actually, I guess you could call it the infantry compartment at the rear of the tank. And so hitting a BMP-2 at the rear pretty much assures that that BMP will be destroyed. What's funny to me is that the Soviets never really had an idea of caring about safety ever, as far as producing any kind of equipment. Usually their vehicles were poorly thought out and designed, and the BMP-1 and 2 are clear examples of that kind of design philosophy. Putting the fuel tank right in the center of the infantry compartment, and if I pull it up, y'all can actually see it. BMP-2 infantry compartment. Let me see if there are some pictures of the inside of this thing, because you won't believe it. It's literally just a massive fuel tank there in the middle. It's right there, where the seats are, and that's a big fuel tank. And so if anything shoots through the back of that tank and into that fuel tank, that thing can catch on fire and pretty much explode, and all of the infantry in the vehicle will probably be burned alive. So it's not really a good design, much like the normal Russian fashion. And you can get a pretty good example of it right there. And pretty much all of their vehicles are designed with inherent flaws in them that you would almost think were written in a movie where the villains were comically stupid. And of course, the Soviets designed all of their equipment like this. There's always some kind of inherent flaw with everything they made. So with that, hope you all have gotten a little bit of extra information as to why that hit was a pretty solid one. And we're now going to move on to the area around Varvarivka. I believe that's how that's pronounced. We can also see a monastery here in this town. I hope that one's undamaged as well. Y'all may remember the other day, and I'm actually going to show y'all this clip again, this heavy mortar in Mariupol. Now, we're revisiting yesterday's news, but everyone bear with me because this is something important to show. Here's this heavy mortar. Remember this? Got rid of it. It went black hole. Anyways, y'all got the idea. We saw that yesterday here on stream. Get this, y'all. We weren't the only ones to watch that video. Operator Starsky's unit watched that video, and they actually found out, hey, that looks like a place we've seen before. And so they got on Google Maps, and they started looking around and trying to geolocate where that 240mm heavy mortar was. And they figured out it was in Varvarivka. So here in these pictures, you can actually see the burning 240mm mortar that was on yesterday's stream in the exact same spot it was in the film. And you can see the Google Maps where they found geolocated where exactly it was based off of the video they saw. You can then see it being hit and burning up. We'll watch that video in a second. And then finally, you can actually see where exactly it was. It's hilarious to me that they actually geolocated this thing and destroyed it because of the Russians' hubris and uploading a video that soon about where they were. Of course, this video was included in the Enforcer short clip today, and here we can see the video, the tank getting a little toasty. As we can see, the heavy mortar is on fire. We're not really sure if any personnel were killed with the tank, but now we can see it brewing up for sure. And then finally, here in a second, we're about to see it go into full-on cooking mode. And then there's the picture of that mortar in the exact same spot it was in the video yesterday. You can't make up this comical level of stupidity. This kind of stuff is the reason why Ukraine will be able to win this war. So I think this journalist here who actually helped the Ukrainians destroy this mortar, he's actually doing as much for the war effort as anyone else is. So I think the goofball here, he's really helping out a lot, and I hope that he continues on with this kind of careless and stupid reporting on his end because it's helping out our side a lot. We're now going to move on outside of the village of Varvarivka, yeah, and we're now going to move down to Rubizhny. While the Russians did manage to push the Ukrainians out of Rubizhny, this doesn't mean that the Ukrainians are not touching them anymore. It seems like they're touching them to a pretty good degree, and they're not going to stop anytime soon. Here we can see the 24th Brigade destroying a BRDM-2 with a ATGM in the Rubizhny area. We can see the BRDM moving down the road. We can now hear the ATGM fire. And there it is. It's on the way. I don't think he'll be escaping.
Лівіше. Оп.
Nope.
Красота. Yes.
If they were carrying Mr. Lunchtime in that vehicle, that may explain why it wasn't able to escape. Of course, wonderful to see. And moving on to the next clip we've gotten from the Rubizhny area, we can see the 24th Brigade commit another Stugna attack in the area of Rubizhny, once again wiping out another Russian vehicle. Actually, it's a duplicate of the last one. So, we can see that the 24th Brigade has knocked out one BRDM-2 in the area, and hopefully many other vehicles that we haven't seen on film, although I'm not entirely sure, and that would be an assumption, considering I don't have any information to show that. We're now going to move further up from the area of Severodonetsk and towards the village of Mariupol, where we've also seen a supply convoy destroyed on its way to Severodonetsk, and almost entirely. Let me put this up on full screen, I'm muted. There you can see some burning Russian supply vehicles on the road. So, wonderful to see, and hopefully those supplies will never be used by the Russians, and they'll be able to ensure that the Russians start going a little hungry and start running out of a little bit of gas. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news, which is actually a little bit of ways from the Severodonetsk area, and we're about to get down to the breakthrough. So everyone bear with me and stay here for just a few minutes. We're about to get there and start covering some very important news and the reason why we have tonight's thumbnail and also title the way it is. We're now going to move into Luhansk itself towards the village of Shastia, where today we've seen a Russian convoy get obliterated. Wait a minute, what? Huh, apparently it removed that video and switched it out with another one. That sucks. Unfortunately, I was about to show y'all about 10 vehicles on the road that were destroyed and burning, but unfortunately it looks like something happened and the videos were switched out. So, sorry about that, but I will let y'all know that 10 vehicles, 10 supply trucks were destroyed today near the village of Shastia. With that, we're now going to move on towards the Popasna area, and now we're going to start talking about the important news we've heard around here today and what may be occurring around the front. Up here, starting off with some good news before we get to a little bit of less good news, we can see that the Ukrainians managed to capture an MTLB today somewhere in the area of Hirs'ke and Popasna. As you can see, an MTLB, just like every other, but the Ukrainians now own it. So, wonderful to see. Of course, the Ukrainians will most likely use the MTLB. While they're not the best, of course, anything is better than nothing, and capturing anything from the Russians is always a step up. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news from the Popasna area. And we don't actually have an actual news bulletin today. I actually talked about this in discussion with Operator Starsky, and I did confirm that a breakthrough had been occurring here for the past day, and the Russians have managed to bypass Popasna and they've made it to Tripilia. They've also managed to do the same thing in Hirs'ke, and they've managed to bypass the infantry there and push as far as Vrubivka. Both of these pushes are actually using a brand new Russian tactic that has not been seen on the battlefield before, and it finally looks like the Russians may have learned a little bit. Hopefully the Ukrainians can learn how to counter this incredibly quickly, but here's the strategy that they were using according to Starsky, and this is one of the few things I know is okay to say because it's not giving away anything important. The Russians are apparently dedicating their mechanized brigades and these new strategies that have led to these breakthroughs in attacking the Ukrainian units directly. While the Ukrainian units are fighting the mechanized units, believing that that's the actual firefight, the Russians are using an airborne brigade to push through the weak spot beside this Ukrainian unit and then start moving behind them, threatening them with encirclement. Then, in response, the Ukrainian units have to retreat and then reform a new defensive line so that way they can prepare a new defensive area and also not get encircled. That's what's led to these two breakthroughs near Hirs'ke and Popasna today, and it is showing a very scary thing, I would have to say. And I hate to say that because I don't ever want to sound like I'm fear-mongering on here, but I would say that this is looking pretty risky. These breakthroughs have covered, and let me make sure I'm correct in saying this, some 5 miles each over the course of around 24 to 48 hours. That's a pretty decent speed. And so, here's what's the problem. Reaching Bakhmut isn't an issue. The problem is that up here near Lvivka, they actually have a small little country road that goes through Mykolaiv and to the T-1302. The T-1302 is the only highway that goes to Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. So this is a major supply corridor for the Ukrainians just because it's the only highway that goes in that direction. Of course, there is a second route. There is a detour that the Ukrainians could take. They could take the T-0513 and then take a right at Severodonetsk and travel down some country roads and then make it to Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. But you have to remember that roads and their sizes and also the quality of those roads, whether they're dirt, gravel, or paved, indicates how much supply traffic can actually go down them. And so highways are always preferable because they can carry a larger amount of supplies. The Russians are now threatening the T-1302 with being overrun. If the Russians manage to actually reach out and get onto the T-1302, that means that the major supply artery leading into Severodonetsk and Lysychansk is cut off, and now the Russians are on a main road where they can actually push an encirclement, and instead of it occurring near Bila Ora, it would actually be occurring from the area of Popasna and Lvivka. So this is appearing to be a little bit dangerous and risky. The Ukrainians, of course, are keeping an eye on the situation, and they are reacting to it. I can't really get into the exact details of how, but I do believe that this breach will be shored up incredibly soon, and the fighting will most likely remain static, and hopefully not extend out onto the T-1302, which will put the defensive forces of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk in a tougher position, because then they'll be having to work off of a reduced supply route, or a reduced number of supplies. So hopefully the Ukrainians are able to manage to hold this area of the front. It is looking a little bit risky right now, but I have faith in the Ukrainians. They've managed to pretty much do miracles so far, and I believe that they'll be able to continue on. Hopefully sooner rather than later in this particular instance, as it is threatening the position of the Ukrainians here in Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. We're now going to move further down the line. Also, this marker just says that. It just made sure that I would cover that. I don't actually have any sources for that, rather than what Starsky told me. And Starsky's a pretty trusty guy, so I believe everything he says 100%. He explained the situation to me as it occurred to him. We're now going to move on down the front and into the Donetsk area, where we've gotten one bit of news today, where we've actually seen Ukrainian tanks under pro-Russian artillery fire near the area of Marinka. Here in this clip, we can see what appears to be two Ukrainian T-64s moving down the road. Of course, with slideshow footage. Let me see if I can get it out of slideshow mode. Here we go. It's out of slideshow mode here. We'll put it on full screen. And we're going to mute it because it has copyrighted music. But you can see here that the two T-64s are moving around this highway. We can now see some shelling landing around these tanks, and it appears that one of the T-64s actually got hit on the front glacis, it appears, or the side of the turret. We can see that one of the crew members has already abandoned the vehicle. I'm assuming that's the gunner, considering that the fire is closest to his position in the tank. We can now see the tank backing up through the trees, and it appears that the commander may be bailing out right now and also abandoning the vehicle. Yes, we can now see that the commander is running away from the tank. And in a second, we'll actually see the driver or the gunner hop out of the tank as well and bail. So we know that all 3 crew members, there we go, there's the 3rd crew member. All 3 crew members of that tank did survive. They are fine. So that's good to know. And we can see that the other, that actually looks like a T-84 to be honest, did survive completely unscathed. Once again, with Russian-designed tanks, if the engine is knocked out, the tank is knocked out. The autoloader requires the engine to be on to function, and also the hydraulic systems require the engine to be on. So if the engine is hit or damaged, that pretty much wipes out the entire tank as far as the crew is concerned, and so we can see the crew bail. This is one of the few instances we've seen on film of the Ukrainians losing a tank, and so while it is unfortunate, it is good to know that this is a very rare instance and something we don't see often on film. Also, I'd like to address something here in the comments real quick. Aw, man, got deleted. Someone said, stop bashing CNN. I will never stop bashing mainstream news. I believe they're the most untruthful people out there. They pretty much run everything to freak people out and get people on there watching their stuff. Just don't like it. And I bet a lot of people can agree with me, honestly, because that's why everyone's here and watching this news and not CNN. I literally watched them just a second ago before we came down here. I walked by the TV, and they were talking about, they made a documentary about Putin. It was brand new. It was very poorly put together, and they had people saying absolute BS. Like 300 years of Soviet history was destroyed in an instant with the fall of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union only existed for 87 years. How in the world can 300 years of legacy and history be destroyed from an 87-year-old country falling apart? That didn't make any sense to me, and it throws a lot of... And also they contort history however they want to just make the message they want. They made it sound like Putin's entire ambition his whole entire life is getting back Ukraine, but he's been doing a whole bunch of stuff trying to make sure that Russia keeps some kind of... I guess you could say sphere of influence in Central Asia and also Eastern Europe, his entire legacy. You know, the Central Asian countries, Georgia, Chechnya, you know, the other countries like Belarus, and making sure that they keep aligned. That's been his entire goal. So, you know, it was all fake. I hope y'all can agree with me, because I don't like the mainstream news whatsoever. Now, I would go on the mainstream news if they offered me. I'd go on there and give a plug to this channel, so hopefully it could get more followers. But I would never actually sit there and say they're a credible source of news. They just say whatever to get people on there watching. We're now going...
And Enforcer, may I add a quick note to that?
Oh, sure, go ahead. You scared the hell out of me, but go ahead.
And I will say this to everybody that's saying, everybody's saying, well, Fox News is too, and you're correct. All of the mainstream news outlets, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, every single one pretty much on the air right now is basically for entertainment. There is some news sprinkled in there as well, but it's mainly just basically people's opinions. It's not really news anymore.
Yeah, and I also would like to add on to that with Matthew there, is that I was bashing CNN because I saw someone say that, but Fox News falls under the same category. All of them do, but the two major ones are Fox and CNN based off of the ratings. They're the two largest ones in the country. Well, actually, I think MSNBC may be larger than CNN, but still, the thing is that they all just go about the stuff stupidly. Like Fox News, they go in one direction. They just... And both sides contort everything. It's unbelievable to the degree they'll contort it. And then Fox News will go the extra level of stupid. Not that it's any worse than CNN's. They have like stupid to their own degrees. But Fox will go the extra level, and they'll get people completely unqualified to talk about things on there to talk about them, like wrestlers and baseball players, and they're talking about the capture of prisoners of war, and they've never served in the military or anything like that, and I'm like, what in the world is going on? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So I just want y'all to know I'm not bashing CNN alone. They're the example I was going at right there, but it's mainstream news as a whole. I don't like them, and I think they're dishonest in their reporting. With that, we're now going to move further down the line, and we're now going to move into the city of Mariupol. I'm not even sure what the situation is anymore. The Russians are saying all of the forces have surrendered. Ukraine hasn't come out and made a statement. And we're still getting videos from there, and so I'm assuming that there may be some left. I still haven't seen the commander and co-commander on film being captured, which does tell me that apparently they still haven't surrendered yet. I'm waiting for a video of them coming out, and that will confirm to me that the final Azov defenders are out of the plant, because I'm considering them the final soldiers, and I haven't seen them on film yet on the Russian side. Here in this video, we can actually see a video edited together by a soldier who did surrender, and these are his last days in the Azovstal, and it's very eerie. So I'm just going to let y'all see the film. I'm actually going to unmute it, and if it does have copyrighted music, oh well. But here's the video. And with that, that's the end of the video. And of course, it's crazy and eerie to think that people actually lived in that Azovstal metallurgical plant. Those defenders did, and the civilians that were there for an incredibly long time as well, in conditions like that day after day. It looks surreal. It, honestly, to me, looks like something out of a nightmare. And it's insane to think that they endured living through that for around 3 months. 84 days is as close to 3 months as you can get. And there were soldiers in there the entire time. And I thought that that was a cinematic masterpiece. Honestly, it's amazing to believe that that soldier who was in the Azovstal power plant was able to film that and also edit it before he got surrendered and put that out to the world and kind of give off the, I guess, the feeling that he was getting by being in there. So, very interesting video, and with that, we don't have any more news on the Azovstal and Mariupol as of today. The Russians are claiming that all of the Ukrainians have surrendered, but I haven't gotten that information, and I also haven't seen the commander and co-commander of the Azovstal dead or surrendered, so I don't believe that it's fallen yet. I still believe that there are some defenders in there, although I believe there's very few of them, and it's most likely a token resistance at this point, unfortunately. We're now going to move further on down the front line, and we're now going to pass the area south of Zaporizhia. We haven't gotten any news there as of the past 2 days, and we're now going to reach this city of Kherson. Oh, wonderful Kherson. Everyone's always wondering about Kherson and what's happening there. People are wondering, have the Ukrainians managed to take the city yet? No. But one thing they have managed to do is hurt the Russians so bad equipment-wise that the Russians are now using Toyotas. That's right. They're in the same category as ISIS now. Look at that. It's a Toyota. We can see here that they've mounted an AGS on top, and it looks like they're trying to make some kind of makeshift armor on the back of the truck to protect the 2 Russians that are sitting in the back of it. We can also see a Russian soldier here, and another one standing beside the vehicle appearing to talk to the Ukrainians there. And that's one hell of a scene right there. The Russians have gotten so dirt poor in terms of their economy and their military abilities, they're now having to whip out such improvised things as this, and they're also using 18th century artillery to defend checkpoints near Kherson. I'm believing that the Russians in the Kharkiv area and also Kherson are not doing well based off of what we've been seeing over the past week in terms of the supplies that they have there. We're now going to move outside of Kherson. That's all the news we have for today from this entire area. And we're now going to move into Mykolaiv, where today we've seen that a fish shop was hit by some kind of missile or a rocket in the area, and it destroyed this fish shop. And so here's the video.
Вот так вот, ракетным ударом. Второй раз уже, блядь, базу строительной компании деметаллизировали, блядь. Хер их, блядь, знает эти пидорасы-расисты. Зарели тут и заправочная станция, и склады. Строительные материалы. И машина. Volkswagen, Фрейтон. Тоже видно, блядь, им, сука, мешало. Все нахуй, блядь, взорвали ракеты, пидорасы ебаные.
The Russians have now declared war with the Sockeye Nation. They attacked a fish shop. That Sylvia the Sockeye salmon is spinning in her grave right now, seeing that the Russians have now attacked their nation as well. When will this end? Hopefully, getting on a serious note, hopefully no one was injured or killed when that fish shop was hit. Of course, it's unfortunate to think that civilians have to live in fear of being the target of a Russian attack every single day. It's almost like the Russians have turned into like an actual legitimate country, like I guess you could call ISIS. and they're just attacking civilians for no reason. And they pretty much make it clear that they have very derogatory views against the Ukrainians in general. They throw slurs out all the time whenever they talk about them, and and it seems like they consider them inferior, second or third rate people. So I believe that this attack was most likely directed at the fish shop, just so that way they could hopefully kill a few civilians in the Russians' minds. And hopefully the sickos that conducted this attack will face justice someday, and incredibly soon. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news, and it's actually not Mykolaiv, it's in Odessa. Here in Odessa, we've seen that an industrial building was hit, and the firefighters are trying to quell the fire and also assess the damage. And so, here's the video. Here we can see one of the massive craters caused by the attack. And it's unfortunate to see that the Russians just continue to attack civilian infrastructure without regard for civilian lives over and over again throughout this war. Hopefully, once again, the Russians will be held accountable for these crimes and will face justice. It seems, though, that the Ukrainians, even when trying to make the Russians face the worst justice that they can possibly imagine, the Ukrainians are, of course, very lenient, and so far the only war criminal that they have convicted of their crimes and sentenced has gotten a life sentence in prison, and not what I was expecting, which was an execution of some sort. So with that, we're now going to move on from the Odessa area, and we have covered all of the news for today. We're now going to go to the speech from President Zelensky, which will wrap up today's news, and then we'll move into the question segment and answer all of the super chats and answer as many live chat questions as possible. And so, here is the speech from the man, the myth, the legend, the hero, the statesman, and the historic figure, Volodymyr Zelensky.
Українці, українки, наші захисники і захисниці. Сьогоднішній день в нашій державі має подвійне значення. Це День науки і День Європи. Я вітаю наших науковців, які попри всі труднощі, тим не менше працюють заради того, щоб Україна зберегла і розвинула свій науковий потенціал. Звичайно, у час повномасштабної війни всі сили суспільства і держави можуть бути направлені тільки на захист. І це значні обмеження і для науки, і для культурної сфери, і для інших фундаментальних частин суспільного життя. Але такий час. Робимо все, щоб якнайшвидше повернутися до правил мирного часу. А також хочу сказати слова вдячності усім, хто докладає зусиль, щоб Україна нарешті стала частиною об'єднаної Європи. Всім нашим дипломатам, всім нашим державним службовцям, які зараз мають за лічені тижні виконати завдання, яке інші держави долали роками, коли йшли до Євросоюзу. І хочу підкреслити, наш євроінтеграційний шлях – це не просто про політику, це про якість життя, про те, що українці відчувають життєві цінності так само, як і абсолютна більшість європейців. Сьогодні у Києві провів переговори з прем'єр-міністром Португалії. Подякував йому за всю ту підтримку, яку Португалія зараз надає Україні. І це і оборонна, і політична, і гуманітарна підтримка. Я вдячний за тепле ставлення до наших людей, які знайшли прихисток на португальській землі. Обговорили з паном прем'єр-міністром подальше посилення санкцій проти Російської Федерації, а також післявоєнну відбудову нашої держави. Португалія готова долучитися до відновлення України, до відбудови українських шкіл і дитячих садочків. І я хочу нагадати, що за час повномасштабної війни російська армія зруйнувала вже 1873 заклади освіти. Це колосальний масштаб втрат. Але коли з тобою об'єднана Європа, американське лідерство і весь вільний світ, можеш подолати і це. Я вдячний президенту Байдену за невідкладне підписання ухваленого Конгресом пакету підтримки для України на 40 мільярдів доларів. Це історичний внесок у захист свободи в Європі. Говорив сьогодні з прем'єр-міністром Італії Маріо Драгі. Основну увагу приділили ситуації на полі бою і тому, як можна пришвидшити перемогу України. Погодилось, що має бути прискорений 6-й пакет санкцій проти Росії. Вдячний за повну підтримку Італії на шляху до Євросоюзу. Воєнна ситуація за сьогоднішній день не знала суттєвих змін, але насправді було важко. Насправді те, що маємо змогу говорити, це на 87-й день повномасштабної війни проти Росії є непоганою новиною. Росія направила фактично всі свої ресурси, щоб нас знищити. В російських регіонах відкрито говорять, що їхня так звана спецоперація є причиною для економічного падіння, зокрема таких галузей, як будівництво і багатьох інших, а також і причиною для збідніння людей, яке може бути ще більшим, ніж у 90-ті роки. Зростання цін, знецінення доходів, руйнація усього того економічного потенціалу, який створений в Росії з 2000-х, окупантів це поки не зупиняє. Але колосальні витрати на війну їм все одно і не допомагають, і не допоможуть. На Донбасі ситуація надзвичайно важка. Як і в попередні дні, російська армія намагається наступати на Слов'янськ і Северодонетськ. Збройні сили України стримують цей наступ кожен день, який наші захисники і захисниці відбивають у цих наступальних планів Росії, зриваючи їх, є конкретним внеском у наближення головного дня, бажаного дня, який всі ми так чекаємо і за який боремось, Дня перемоги. І жодні російські удари, ані ракетні по Рівненщині, ані артилерія по Харківщині чи Сумщині, ані всією можливою зброєю по Донбасу результату Росії не дадуть. Підписав указ сьогодні про нагородження наших героїв 215 військовослужбовців Збройних сил України, відзначені державними нагородами, з них 30 посмертно. Майже щодня в мене на столі такі чи інші подібні укази про відзначення наших захисників, наших захисниць, про присвоєння звання Героя України. І це відображає тяжкість воєнної ситуації. Війна, на жаль, продовжується, війна не закінчилась. Нам ще потрібно битись і йти вперед до перемоги. Можливо, комусь у деяких містах в тилу здається, що про війну можна забути і стати безтурботним чи навіть недбалим, але ні, це не так. Щодня гинуть українці за нашу незалежність. Щодня. І кожна з нас мають щоденно дбати про те, щоб допомогти обороні, допомогти армії, тим, чим можуть, так, як можуть. Вічна слава усім, хто став на захист України, вічна пам'ять кожному і кожній, хто віддав життя за нашу державу. Слава Україні!
And with that, that was the end of President Zelensky's speech, and that wraps up the Day 87 news. If you were here for the news only, I thank you all so much for watching. If on the way out you would like to like, comment, and subscribe, it does help out this channel a lot and helps us to reach more people and deliver this news further and better than before. So I thank everyone who was just for the news, here for the news, for watching. It's of course a great honor that a lot of y'all find this news credible and worthy to watch. And with that, we're now going to move on into the question segment and answer everyone's super chats, answer as many live chats as we can, and then after that we'll be wrapping up the stream. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so it is now time for the questions. And Enforcer, real quick, how is my mic volume sounding?
It's sounding pretty good to me.
Okay, I think I was just up pretty close to it a moment ago. That's why I jump scared everybody, so sorry about that. But up first, we have a $78 donation from Ryan Miller, who says, thank you for your service.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. I don't have any actual military background, so if you're giving me that super chat saying thank you for your service, like in the military, oh no, 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 I don't have any of that. But if you're talking about the services in, spending like 10 to 12 hours a day working on the stream, thank you very much for the support. It does, of course, help out this channel a load, and I'm glad that you do enjoy it. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $40 donation from Just Lucky, I guess, who does not leave a comment. Thank you very much for your support. That $40 donation is very generous of you, and it helps us run the channel. So moving on, next up, we have a $36 donation from Anthony Dobson, who says, like our Aussie comrades, we in Singapore cannot donate. Is there a way we can contribute to the Enforcer total without having to pay YouTube's 30% piece? It could get expensive otherwise. PayPal or vouchers on the merch store potentially.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. I do have a PayPal, but I generally don't like to accept donations through there. And that's something that I don't like about what YouTube does to the Australian viewers and also now the Singaporean viewers as well, is that they stop y'all from sending in donations, which is really annoying to me. Also, another thing is that YouTube does not take 30% of your fundraiser donations. 100% of your fundraiser donation goes to the nonprofit. YouTube actually is very generous with that, in which they handle all of the fees involved, and 100% of your donation goes to the nonprofit. So if I run a fundraiser for, say, Red Cross, and you send in a $100 donation, YouTube does not take any of that. There is a processing fee involved for them to actually manage and like do the accounting for that fundraiser, and then they pay for all of that out of their pocket, and they don't take any of that out of the fundraiser total. So it's a very good system actually. YouTube Give is a great one, and that's why I constantly use it. And also it's incredibly safe, and I believe that's a very good assurance to everyone that it's not some kind of scam, because there's no way I can touch that money. And that's something I think is great to assure everyone with, is that through YouTube Give, your money goes straight from you into an account managed by YouTube, and it doesn't cross paths with me whatsoever. It goes straight to YouTube, and then YouTube manages that money and then sends it off to the nonprofit. So I hope that kind of addresses the question. But as far as donating and you not being able to, I hate to say I don't really know of a way around it. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. I'm sorry to say that's all I've got about it, but I do thank you very much for the support, and with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Kaltenberg, who says, keep it going, Enforcer.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad that you do want to keep going. A lot of people love these streams, and everyone's, and recently, because always you look at the negative comments, and of course the negative comments always hit you a lot more than the supportive comments. But every once in a while, they look at the negative comments here and there, and they'll bring you down a little bit. But it's always great to know, and when I really think about it, a lot of people love this stuff. All the videos get like a 98 to 99% like rate. There's almost no one who dislikes the videos. Everyone's always giving massive support to keep the channel running, and they also give massive support in the Sunday fundraisers, and also support through the chat itself, saying I'm doing a great job. And it's always good to know that there's a lot of people who do appreciate what I'm doing, because sometimes I look at the comments and I'm like, man, does anyone really like it? And the answer is yeah. It's just that I'm looking at some comments, I'm letting them eat on me a little bit too much. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. I'm glad that you do enjoy the stream and like it. And so with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Tony Lowe, who says, hi again from Ridgecrest, California. I watch your show every single day, and you should look up NAWS China Lake.
NAWS China Lake. Let's go to Google Maps here. This appears to be a military installation. What's this? Let's zoom out here. Okay, so Ridgecrest looks, let me make sure I'm correct in believing this. Does it have Google Street View? It does? Wait a minute, hang on. Wait a minute, I'm not really sure. Now I'm really getting confused. No, it's not that. This is interesting. Let me just actually go to a Google thing about this airbase, and let's read up about that since you talked about it, and I'm interested now. Let's see. It's a large military installation in California. that supports the research, testing, and evaluation programs of the Navy. Very interesting. I actually didn't know that. That's really cool. Thank you very much for sharing that little interesting tidbit of information. That is actually cool to see. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support and sharing that little bit of information with us. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from, this time I'm going to get the name right, Raphael Schneeves, who says, Enforcer, with the riverboats idea, I was thinking more about the Kherson area to allow Ukraine to hit Russian logistics with artillery on the boats. And my idea came from the War of 1812 and the Drachnefel YouTube channel.
Well, I watch Drachnefel every once in a while too, and if y'all are into naval history, great channel to go check out. They do some very interesting content over there. Very deep, a deep dive kind of content. It's like 40 minutes long, that's most of the videos, but they're good. I mean, like, they're really good. And I've watched a decent amount of them. But yes, most of the time whenever I think of gunboats like that, I think of the Civil War. But that's something that I think could be plausible. You know, on the further inland rivers, you know, maybe not really. But at Kherson, I think there would be a significant viability to that strategy, if I could say that. But the thing is that modern war, I just don't know if it supports those kinds of strategies anymore when you really think about it. Because towed artillery can do the same thing that naval, well, gunboats could do. And then on top of that, the gunboats could be at threat of being attacked by the Black Sea Fleet. Although they are far away, I don't know if they would be in range or not. But it's still an interesting idea, and I think it is worthy of discussion. And if it is something that's a possibility, I just wonder how Ukraine would manage to fabricate the gunboats or get them. But still, I thank you so much for the support and also clarifying what you meant. And it is, of course, cool to know that you are a little bit of an 1812 fan. I think it's really cool because not a lot of people think of the Napoleonic Wars being in the United States, but the War of 1812 literally happened at the very end of the Napoleonic era, which is really interesting to me because we've got to see a little bit of how the United States handled in the Napoleonic era of warfare. And the answer was, it was questionable. I mean, like, you know, when Washington, D.C. gets burned to the ground, it's a little bit of a questionable thing, but I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment. It's very interesting that that's something that you've been thinking about, and it's a really cool little topic to talk about. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $30 donation from a longtime supporter, Paolo Corradini, who says, Silly late stream question. Given what you said about Seinfeld and some other U.S. sitcoms, I was wondering if you've ever seen Parks and Recreation. It certainly beats The Office in my opinion. Nick Offerman is a joy to watch.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Paolo Corradini. If you're sending in euros, I'm assuming you're from the European Union area, at least, you know, in one of the countries that are a member of there. And that's very interesting to know that you actually are at least knowledgeable pretty well on American TV shows. I never actually imagined that American culture extends beyond the United States, but then again, every once in a while I'm always reminded by that when a South Korean who's immigrated to America is like, oh, I grew up my whole entire life watching American TV shows and stuff like that. But to answer that question, I haven't seen Parks and Recreation. Just to remind everyone, I live under a rock, so I don't really know a lot about the modern world as a whole. Well, you know, I know a lot about it politically and economically and stuff, but beyond that, I have no idea at all about like modern pop culture. That's something I'm completely oblivious to. And sometimes I think it's for the best, you know, because I don't get caught up in the drama, and I also don't become superficial, I think, by doing that, because I feel like some people really get into, and this isn't everyone, of course, this is very few people, but I always am scared of becoming one of these. They start worshiping celebrities and they try and live like a celebrity life, and it makes them a little bit narcissistic and stuff, and I'm not really a big fan of that. I feel like, you know, just being a normal person who, you know, just lives their lives, you know, and like watches a show and it's neat, but they really don't get too far into it. That's always me, so I've never sadly been able to get into that stuff. And I've never seen Parks and Recreation. Like, the only sitcom I've watched is Seinfeld. So I thank you very much for the support. I hate to put you down with that, and I know you probably wished I had watched Parks and Recreation. I may give it a try, you know, of course. And with that being said, I thank you so much for the support, and we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Zyper Sniper 1, who is a longtime channel supporter, as many of you know. He says, good to see that Russia never learns modern tactics. Give them hell, Ukraine, and Slava, Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, Zyper Sniper. And to add on to that, the Russians may have appeared to have come out with a winning tactic. They finally learned something because Starsky told me that they're conducting new strategies in the Hirs'ke Popasna area. And so while that's been the case up till now, it appears that the Russians are very slow learners. Hopefully the Ukrainians will be very fast in countering this new strategy and stop it dead in its tracks before it can make any progress. Because if the Russians are able to make breakthroughs like this with a new strategy, this could start being a reoccurring event across the entirety of the front line, which would be very concerning. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that answers the question. And I do thank you once again for being a longtime channel supporter. It does help out this channel a lot, and it helps us to keep running. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And real quick, Enforcer, I just saw a message from one of our viewers. TJ Johnson says, remind your brother to remove the marker in Antarctica, if you know what he's referring to.
I think there is one. Oh, wow, that was from last week. Yeah, thank you very much for bringing that up. I had never noticed that. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have another $20 donation from Zyper Sniper 1, who says, oh, just give up on this useless war, Russia. They lose more and more than they will gain. I hope and believe that Russia will collapse, just like they did in 1991 with the Soviet Union.
I agree with that 100%. They are wasting resources and time down here doing nothing. They're doing nothing of value. It's not actually changing anything as far as their strategic situation. They're just weakening themselves. And in the larger picture, I can see it in the future with the Chinese taking advantage of the Russians' weakened state. And the Chinese never invade anyone. That's something that the Chinese never do, is actually get involved in wars. That's something they have never really done. Rather than Vietnam, they actually fought Vietnam right after the Vietnam War was over. But beyond that, they've never really gotten engaged in a war. So what they'll be doing is economics. They'll be trying to take over Russia economically, much like they're trying to extend their tendrils into Central Asia and also Eastern Africa in a way. And it's a very interesting situation. I'm thinking about actually trying to make a video on that if I ever get the time, because it's something that I believe is a new way, a new strategy for the Chinese to grow their own sphere of influence without actually having to go to war to create it. So I thank you very much for the support, and I do have to agree, the Russians are losing more than they'll ever gain at this point. In manpower, monetarily, and also supply-wise. And I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $100 donation from Steve2848, who says, great show, and I'm really looking forward to tomorrow's guests and your stream.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Steve. That kind of massive support has been coming in from you frequently at this point, and of course, I thank you a huge degree in helping out this channel to keep on running. If it wasn't for folks like all of y'all who send in super chats, the channel just couldn't run. And of course, I'm looking forward to tomorrow's stream as well. We're going to have Ronnie Fit and Operator Starsky on at the exact same time. It's going to be really fun. I feel like, honestly, just letting everyone know in advance, I don't feel like the news will be covered a lot tomorrow just because there's going to be so many people weighing in on it, but I am going to try and make sure that we do keep on track and keep on chugging through the news and like kind of talking about it in ways. But it's just going to be a really interesting one. The fundraiser nights, I don't really consider it all too important. Well, no, I consider it important still to cover the news as best I can, but I consider it far more important the support we're getting for Ukraine at that night, if y'all see what I'm saying. So the actual support for Ukraine takes priority over the news being reported that night. So if we can't really get to we'll get to all of the news, but if we can't get to it as well as we normally do, sorry in advance, but it will be an incredibly fun stream nonetheless. So I thank you so much for the support, Steve, and I can't wait for tomorrow as well. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Larissa Hook, who says, Enforcer, have you heard anything about the possibility of liberation in Kherson?
I have not. It seems like the front lines there have largely stalled. We haven't seen the Ukrainians making any progress. We haven't seen the Russians pushing back out. So as far as the Kherson area, I don't think anything will be changing anytime soon. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to be moving on to the next one.
And up next, we have another $20 donation from Zyper Sniper 1, who says, it looks like Ukraine is going to have more weapons and tanks than they started with when this war ends.
That is true. We've actually heard some information, although I'm not really sure if it's true or not, that the Ukrainians have more tanks now than they started off the war with. I'm not really sure about that, so take that one with a grain of salt. But we do know that the Ukrainians right now have more tanks in the theater than Russia has at the moment. So that's something hilarious and pretty crazy to think about, that the Ukrainians now outnumber the Russian tank force that they've dedicated to this war. So thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from BSG Wolf, who says, if USA is sending Patriot batteries and heavy MLRS, then why ship M777 without targeting the targeting computers? Excuse me.
Could you reread that one more time for me to think about it a little bit?
Yeah, he said, if USA is sending Patriot batteries and heavy MLRS, then why ship M777 without the targeting computers?
I think they may be sending the targeting computers in another shipment. That's why you may have not seen them in that C-17. Because while it would make like common sense in a way for them to pack up everything that goes with the M777 in the same like flight or in the same train, it may not make logistical or shipping sense. And that's something really interesting to me, is that everything in the military beyond shooting someone really revolves around like the civilian sector pretty much, but it's just been, of course, I guess you could say, federalized here in the United States, and it's operated by the government, which is something interesting to me. So it may not make sense shipping-wise, and they're sending those over in another aircraft. But beyond that, that's just an assumption. I'm not really sure why they wouldn't be. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have another $20 donation from Zyper Sniper 1. And thank you for your continued support, Zyper Sniper. He says, here is a coffee fund for the Enforcer and Matt.
Well, I thank you so much, Zyper Sniper. We, of course, enjoy our coffees. I think Matthew drinks pike roast as well, don't you?
Yes.
Pike roast is like the best way to go. I don't know why. It's just actually, I don't drink coffee at all. A lot of y'all may remember when I said I've never drank a coffee, and I drank my first one and I was going a million miles an hour. But that was the first coffee I picked up, and all my coffee I make in a Keurig machine. So it was the first little cup I picked up. I tried it, and I was like, it's good enough. I'll just live with it. And so I've never tried any other coffees. And that's the only one I've had, and that's the only one I'm using right now. But yes, I do thank you very much for the coffee fund. Matthew and me will make sure to drink as many pike roasts as we can. So I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And moving on, we have a $20 donation from a longtime channel legend, Trademarks and Patents for Growing Businesses, who says, Cream and Sweetener Fund. Great job, guys.
Well, I thank you so much for the support. Once again, Trademarks and Patents, you've been around for an incredibly long time as well, supporting this channel. And I do have to say, we will make sure to put as much creamer as possible into the coffees. At one point, I was actually putting so much creamer into the coffees, I was getting sick from the sugar. And so I've had to tone that down a bit. And now I hardly put any creamer in it because I guess I'm just getting used to the taste. So I thank you so much for the support. We will make sure to use some creamer. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And Enforcer, it looks like people were saying, please note, don't give Enforcer caffeine. Giving the Enforcer caffeine is like feeding a grem or whatever that creature, a mogwai off of that show. Is that the correct name for it?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, feeding a mogwai after midnight.
Kind of, yeah. But I mean, at this point, I'm getting so worn out with the coffees, like they don't really do much anymore. But with that, on to the next question.
So up next, believe it or not, we have another $20 donation from Zyper Sniper 1, who says, imagine having Operator Starsky, Funker 530, and Zelensky on stream at the same time.
Oh my lord, that would be insane. But honestly, I would probably remove all of the other guests. Nothing wrong with them or anything, but I want to give Zelensky the floor if he did come on here. Just have his undivided attention, pretty much let him talk about whatever he wants to talk about. Of course, ask him some questions. And just have them on. Someone earlier, of course, I removed this one because this was goofy, but someone said, you know, you're completely unbiased in your reporting until you said your remarks about Zelensky, and now you've discounted all of it. I was like, what? I mean, like, Zelensky's a great guy. No one can really argue that. For someone to sit there and be offered a way out of a bad situation and they said no and stuck with it, you can't sit there and act like that guy isn't a great guy. I mean, like, there's no other politicians who would stick their necks out like that. I mean, like, just months before this war, we saw the president of Afghanistan pack up $100 million into suitcases and bail out of Afghanistan. So, like based off of that and following into this war and seeing that he didn't leave and he actually said, I need ammunition, not a ride, he's a cool guy. So, I thank you so much for the support. And of course, I would make sure that Zelensky had pretty much our undivided attention. He probably wouldn't be on for long, maybe like 10 minutes or so. The man's busy as all get out, and he doesn't get a lot of sleep anyways. And I'm not even sure if I could get him on stream, but I'm still trying to find a way. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and we will make sure to get him on eventually if it's possible. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And just to clarify earlier, I have no idea where I came up with Mogwai from. I meant to say Gremlin. I don't know why I said the other. So yes, thanks for the correction. But up next, we have a $20 donation from another channel legend, BC Skyman, who says, "Did you hear that NATO is now going to arm Moldova? You guys are awesome."
NATO is now going to arm Moldova. Interesting. I didn't hear that, actually. Of course, my news is always pertaining to the front lines and what's going on there. And so most of the time, very rarely, does the news ever extend out of the country. That's why the international news segment is always the last one covered, because it's the smallest one. But I hadn't heard about that, and if that is the case, that's good to know that the United States is trying to make a friend in Moldova as well. And that's a tricky situation with Transnistria and stuff, but that is a whole rabbit hole for another time, because that would be like probably 20 minutes of me just talking about Moldova. So we'll skip on that, but I do thank you very much for the support, and I thank you very much for sharing that information with us. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $19 donation from Private Lunchtime.
Hang
She
on,
says,
wait. What are you laughing about, though? I gotta know.
I'm just laughing about the comments about the Mogwai and the Gremlin thing.
Oh, all right. Well, let's get on with the question then. I saw him too. I was
And
laughing
also-
at those a little.
And also laughing about the new username here, Private Lunchtime. He says, "Hey y'all, I finally cleaned up my username, formerly the name I can't say on stream." He says, "How about a competition for an armorial/crest design for the Leaf Spring Army? As merch, it will sell like hotcakes. Dun 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 dun. Slava Ukraine."
There went Matthew making up a new slogan again, but yeah, that's a pretty cool idea. I think we might think about that. We're trying to figure out, though, the logistics of doing that, because with 62,000 subscribers right now, I'm not really sure where we're at anymore. There would probably be a lot of people who would send in stuff in that competition. And the thing is that either Matthew or me or both of us would have to look over that. And I'm not really sure if I have a lot of time to do that. And I don't know about Matthew either. And I think I saw a super chat or someone say, I need to get more knowledgeable to answer questions, and I think it still slips some people's minds, or they may be too new to realize that I'm spending all of my time already just trying to make these streams, so I don't have a lot of time to do a lot of other things. But I will try and look into it if it is possible, and if any time does come up in the future, I'll try and use it to do that. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support and the suggestion. It's a pretty good one. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And for those asking, we have about 13 super chats left until we get to our live chat questions. So not too much longer on the super chat. So stick around if you want to hear the live chat questions. And next up, we have a $14 donation from Kevin Brand, who says, "For tomorrow night's fundraiser, gift from Down Under."
Well, thank you so much for the support. Did he say that that was for tomorrow's fundraiser?
Yes.
All right, let me make sure to make a note of that. And what is that in American dollars, Matthew? So that way I can put it down.
That one is correctly translated. So it's $14 in American dollars.
Got you. Let me go put that down as a reminder. And this is neat and everything, but I just want to remind everyone that we do that YouTube does take 30% of that. And while I will donate 14, I don't want like a whole bunch of Australians flooding in and doing that, because I could get bankrupted if we had like $10,000 come through and YouTube takes like 30% of it. I could start going broke. So just letting y'all know, but I will make sure to dedicate that to tomorrow's fundraiser. So I added that down to the tally, and I thank you so much for wanting to support Ukraine, and I'll make sure that that makes it into tomorrow's fundraiser. And with that being said, thank you so much, and we're moving on to the next question.
And it looks like we have a lot of channel legends commenting tonight. We now have an $11 donation from Level 70, who says, "Why isn't the U.S. sending M142s to Ukraine? What is their rationale for thinking these will escalate the conflict?"
As of the moment, I believe that the M142s are now being sent over along with the Patriot missile defense systems. But as of the other day, they were saying no. And so I know where you're coming from, and let me explain why. The M142 is an incredibly powerful system. It has a very long range of several hundred miles, and the caliber of the rockets themselves is large. I mean, like, the M142 is an amazing system. And I believe that they're scared that they'll escalate the conflict just because of how competent of a system it is. And that's really all I've got to it. I mean, like, there's really no other way that I can go with that to explain it. I just think that is the sole reason why they're kind of a little skeptical about sending it over. But I thank you so much for the support, Level 70. I hope that does answer the question. And I thank you once again so much for supporting this channel. And with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And next up, I want to recognize a $10 donation from Mia Story. Thank you very much for your donation. She does not leave a comment, but thank you very much. And next up, we have a $10 donation from James Lynn, who says, saw a report today that HIMARS and Patriot are in the next package to head to Ukraine. In addition, Leopard 1A5s and Jeopards from Germany.
Gephards.
Gephards. Okay.
Yeah, we're in Gephards.
Never heard that before.
Here, I'll show it actually on stream. It's a very cool little anti-air defense system. This is a Flak Panzer Gepard. The Gepard, not this one. This is a Gepard like animal. Actually, it looks like a cheetah, so I think it is a cheetah. They're just calling it a Gepard. I guess that's a German name for it. But here we can see a Gepard. The Gepard is an anti-air defense system built onto the Leopard 1 chassis, and it has two 30mm autocannons and a radar, so that way it can lock onto the aircraft and have a lead on it, and then the 30mm, you know, hypothetically, are supposed to shoot the thing down. These kinds of anti-air defense systems do have limited range. Of course, they don't have as much range as a surface-to-air missile, so keep that in mind. But of course, this will be bolstering Ukraine's anti-air defense, and also, anti-air aircraft that have autocannons can actually double down as pretty competent infantry support, because they're almost like, I guess you could call it a BMPT Terminator without the anti-tank guided missiles tacked on. So I don't know how the Ukrainians will be using these, whether they're in the anti-infantry role or the anti-air role, but of course, those are great to have. Also, just for everyone to know, I'm going to show y'all the Leopard 1A5, which I believe is one of the most beautiful tanks ever made in history. This is a Leopard 1. These are a little bit old. I think most of these were made in the 60s and 70s, at least the first ones, and they were updated as time went on. Loads of different variants of the Leopard 1. I believe the Canadians still use some of these. And so they're modern enough to be used, but at the same time, they are getting a little bit old. They have paper-thin armor. They almost have none, but they are pretty good tanks as far as I've been able to collect information-wise. So pretty neat. It's good to know that the Germans will be sending those over, and it's also great to know that the United States will be sending over the Patriot missile defense system, which has been heavily requested by the Ukrainians and pretty much requested by the entire world in general, and also the M142 will be heading over as far as we know as of today. And so I thank you so much for the support and sharing that information with us, and with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And next up, let me recognize a $10 donation from Chris and Ted Sharp, who did not leave a comment, but we appreciate your support nonetheless. So moving on, we have a $10 donation from Judo 2001, who says, what day was Mr. Lunchtime's first appearance? Want to show a friend. Also, Barry is played by Bill Hader.
Thank you for reminding me who that was. Bill Hader's a great comedian, y'all. I like him. I like his style. But moving on from that, could you reread the first part? Because that answer to what we were talking about yesterday threw me off guard.
And let's see here. The first part of the question was, what day was Mr. Lunchtime's first appearance? And I think it might have been day 78, I think.
I think it may have been. I remember that it was a dark gray day on last week. So that would have been...
If I will say that if you go to the search bar on the channel itself, on the Enforcer channel, and you punch in on the search bar on the channel itself, Mr. Lunchtime, it should pop up the video which it appeared in.
I think it should, yeah. So I thank you very much for the support. I think Matthew just answered that question for me better than I could. And so I hope that does answer it, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that being said, and I'm bringing back the that being said intentionally because a lot of people missed it. I know there's going to be some people who whine, someone whines about something. I mean, like, I could actually just sit here and say nothing. Someone will whine about that. So with that, I'm bringing back that being said intentionally. And so with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $50 donation from John Boyer, who says, no question, just kudos to Enforcer and Enforcer Matt. Bravo, President Zelensky, and Slava Ukraine.
Well, thank you so much for the support, John Boyer. Of course, it helps us out a huge deal. And support like that, large support, all support counts, any amount, small, large, anything, it all counts and it all helps us run this channel. But large amounts of support like that, of course, are greatly appreciated because they do help us to keep on running this channel. And so I thank you so much once again for the support and helping us to continue on with what we do. And so with that being said, also bravo to President Zelensky as well. Great president. I think he's a great statesman. Interestingly enough, well, I'm not going to say that. I'm not sure if he would want that said. So thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, let me recognize a $20 donation from TJ Johnson. He doesn't want any recognition, but thank you, TJ, for the kind words and comment. And I will pass it on to the enforcer. And we appreciate you watching as well.
And I do thank you so much for the support. It does help us out a lot, TJ. And I know that you don't want to be recognized too publicly. I think I'm reading the comment right here. But I want to recognize everyone. And so I thank you so much once again, TJ. Your support helps to keep on running this channel, and it helps us out a lot. And so with that, I thank you so much. And we're going to move on to the next question.
And let's see here. We have a... I haven't had time to translate this yet, but we have an Australian $60 donation from James Nyland again, who says, didn't know about YouTube taking a cut. I hope this covers it, and Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, James. Of course, again, that kind of support does help us out a lot. And yes, YouTube does take a cut. Not to get into the monetary side of things too much, but YouTube takes a 70%, well, no, a 30% cut of everything. And I know people are saying that's a little steep, but let me explain the whole entire the system, and you'll actually see it's not too steep compared to the alternatives. If someone sends in a $100 super chat, I get $70 of that. YouTube takes 30 of it, and that's I kind of write that off as the pay, you know, like kind of like the dues that has to be paid to be on the YouTube platform. That's kind of how I explain it way in my head, and try and like justify getting ripped off in a way. But I could get ripped off a lot worse. If I go to Twitch, they take 50% of everything. So it's either I get on here and they take 30%, or I go to Twitch and they take 50. But I do thank you so much for the support. It does help us out a lot. And yes, that certainly did cover it. And so I thank you once again. And also another thing is that it is a little steep, but the alternative is, you know, I do something else and they either take more, or maybe YouTube will stop pushing me. That's one thing I'm scared about, is that YouTube may try and kill my channel. And so, you know, I'm kind of scared about that too. And that's why I'm like, letting them, like, I guess, get their protection money, so that way I don't get conked in the head, because they seem like they're kind of apt to do that to any channel they can. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Mike D, who says, how would a nobody like me join the fight? If I fly to Poland, does Ukraine have recruiters on the Polish border accepting foreigners? I just feel helpless knowing people are fighting for freedom. And Mike, before the enforcer answers that, I will say, unless you have military experience, I would not go over there trying to fight personally, just because a war zone is something you really can't prepare for at all, and you might get blindsided. So I'll let the enforcer answer now.
So let me answer that question real quick and say that I wouldn't even go over there and attempt to volunteer. Starsky told me the last time we talked that they have so many foreign volunteers, even with combat experience, that they're not even able to use them all. A lot of them are just stuck in Lviv, and, you know, other eastern cities, just kind of living off the land, you know, I guess you could say, because there's really no other way for them to use them. They don't really have enough supplies to give them to actually field them, and so really you would just be going over there and kind of tying up supplies and resources at this point, which is insane to me. And I have to say, while that doesn't sound great, it is a huge attribute to how many people actually wanted to help out, is that the Ukrainians didn't even expect and accommodate that many people volunteering. I mean, at this point, the volunteer legions have gotten so large that they no longer have a volunteer legion, a foreign legion composed of every nation. They have independent legions for each country. So there's a US legion, a British legion, a Canadian legion, a Russian legion, a Belarusian legion. Every country you can imagine nearly that's Western or pro-Ukrainian has its own legion, or I guess you could say, yeah, pretty much legion at this point. So I wouldn't go over there just yet, but if you did want to help out, you can always, of course, support fundraisers like the ones we run here on this channel, or other fundraisers all around the internet. A lot of people are running them. Just make sure it's safe. Don't get yourself scammed. There's a lot of scams going on out there. And also, another way that you can help out is that going over there and fighting, you don't always have to go over there and fight. You could always try and pick up another role, like a truck driver. They need a lot of truck drivers. Of course, logistics is important. You could go over there and volunteer for that. You could go over there and volunteer for civilian work. You could maybe volunteer with the Red Cross and go over there and help out the Red Cross, or Doctors Without Borders. Maybe you could be an assistant. I'm not really sure. There's a lot of ways to help out, but combat isn't the only way. There's many other roles that have to be filled that are critically important to the war effort. And so while the Foreign Legion has really run out of room for new soldiers and recruits, they have not run out of room in the other categories that need to be filled. So make sure to fit your skill in your skill set and go over there if you want to and try and help out any way you can. Any help is better than no help. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Vasily, who says that artillery, excuse me, let me start over. That artillery, quote unquote, heaviest mortar got blown up. It seems everything that reporter films always ends up exploded. Maybe he can give Putin an interview next.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I was waiting for that to come up. I was sitting there thinking, oh, I know where this is going, and it went right there. I thank you so much for the support, and I do have to agree. That guy kind of has a tendency of showing off things that tend to explode. I don't know if he's some kind of Ukrainian double agent. Hopefully us saying that doesn't mean that the FSB will go and conk him in the head now. But I do hope that he will give an interview to some higher-up Russian leaders, give away their locations directly. He'll pretty much start off the interview by unrolling like a scroll and being like, we are here in the Kremlin, building number 47, room number 115. And he'd start off like that so that way they know exactly where to strike. But yes, I do agree. That guy's pretty much getting the Russians killed. And so great job on him. Hope he keeps it up. And I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And next up, we have another $10 donation from BC Skyman, who says, does anyone know what the Ukrainian losses are in equipment, etc.?
Unfortunately, those numbers are kept pretty tightly sealed. No one really knows the exact number of losses. And here comes the army. I mean, like, you know, I'm always... not to focus on the negative, but there's always a small little group of people whenever I say that, oh, come on, man, you're not wanting to focus on the Ukrainians. It's not that I'm not wanting to focus on their losses. I wish we did have those numbers, but they keep them under lock and key, and so I don't actually have them to report them. So I hate to say that, but I do thank you very much for the support. If I did have the numbers, I would let you know, but as of like a week or a week and a half ago, it was around 3,000 soldiers killed, and probably around 6,000 to 7,000 wounded going off of that number. And so I thank you very much for the support. I hope that answers the question to the best I can with the little information we have. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Mike D again, who says, do you think that we have advisors in Ukraine, CIA, Green Berets to train with the use of U.S. weapon systems and to reverse engineer Russian tech to exploit for weaknesses?
I believe that the advisors may be over there right now. Of course, advisors are never forbidden in war. And we know that the United States did have advisors over there during 2014, so I think that is a possibility. So I believe so. Could you reread the part beyond that, beyond, you know, the advisors over there real quick?
He says, CIA, Green Berets to train with the use of U.S. weapon systems and to try to reverse engineer Russian tech to exploit for weakness.
Now, one thing that the United States will do is they'll just ship the stuff straight out of the country. If they want something, they'll just grab it and take it. I mean, like, if I'm remembering correctly, they went to Niger or Mali, and they took an Mi-24. No, I think it may have been Chad, actually. But they took an Mi-24 out of one of these Central African countries here. Well, really North African countries. We'll call them North African. One of these North African countries, and they just transported the whole entire thing back to the United States. They didn't even keep it there. They just brought it back. So I think that the CIA and groups like that, while they are, of course, in Ukraine, most of their operations where they're actually having dealings with the Ukrainians, unless if it's in a safe location, will most likely be back in the United States because they have a lot of course, they have the best facilities here inside the country. So I hope that answers the question the best I can. And I want to address something here real quick that I saw, and I think this is a little bit of a goodness gracious, what's wrong with this? The great Coinholio said, did this dude just say the Soviet Union never controlled Poland? Maybe look up the Polish People's Republic. Here's the problem with that. You're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Putin wants to control parts of Poland, like actually have them as part of the Russian Federation. The Soviet Union didn't control parts of Poland. The borders that Poland has right now are the borders that the Polish People's Republic had. And so while it was a puppet and somewhat under the Soviet Union's control, it wasn't actually part of the Soviet Union. It was part of the Warsaw Pact, or the Eastern Bloc, as people call it. So not I think that you might need to pull up a Google search on what was actually within the borders of the Soviet Union and what was a part of the Warsaw Pact, because while they did have exert influence and some level of control over them, they weren't actually a part of the Soviet Union. So just wanted to answer that real quick. I mean, like, you wrote out almost the max amount of message that could be written, and I was like, wow. I was like, come on. So with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have another $11 donation from Level 70, who says, can the M142s take out the Kerch Bridge to Crimea?
Yes, they could. We do know that they have the range for sure, I believe. It's something like 100-something miles, and it would be right within range at the closest part of the front line. So it would be putting the M142s at the risk of getting hit, but at the same time, they could hit the Kerch Bridge, maybe with enough munitions to actually damage it to the point part of it gets destroyed. So to answer that question, yes. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're moving on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from 21 Grams. He says, when you're expecting Red Dawn from the mighty Russian army, and you get Red Dumb, and Toyota's blowing up your fish stop.
Well, thank you very much for the support. And yeah, the Russians turned out to be a pretty underwhelming fighting force. Of course, everyone in the world, because, the Russians are always hyped up by everyone. Oh, the Russians. And they have that, I guess you could say, level of mystery and fear around them due to Soviet-era power. But actual modern Russian power is very weak. So I hope that does address the question pretty well. And yes, I like that joke. That's actually pretty good. Red Dawn, Red Dumb. I like that. So thank you very much once again for the support. And with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Tangen Bragiri, who says, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and thumbs up to you for supporting this channel. It helps us out a lot, and it helps us to keep on running these streams. And with that, we're on to the next question, and thank you once again.
And moving on to the next question here, we have one from DJ Bonebreaker, who puts in a $10 donation and says, let's see, trench warfare, massed indiscriminate artillery bombardments, and deploying Maxim machine guns to the front lines. What year do the Russians think it is? Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. And yeah, that's a pretty good comparison there, picking out some of the good stuff that the Russians have been using. I think that they do think it's 1917 because they think that they have an unlimited manpower pool to pull from here, and they don't. So I thank you very much for the support. And also, just for everyone to know, I have shot a Maxim gun before, and while they are old, and while I don't think they really have a place in the modern world, they are really cool. I mean, like, I'm a big fan of the Maxim guns, the Vickers guns, and also, I believe the 1917 guns that the United States had for a short while. Just for y'all to know, that's like a modified Vickers. I'm actually not going to pull that up. But I thank you very much for the support. And I do have to say, the Russians are fighting like they're in a different time period. Not World War I, but it seems like they're trying to fight like they're in the Cold War. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And DJ Bonebreaker, we are still waiting on that remix. So if you ever want to send us that remix, we still want it. So thank you very much for your support. And we're moving on to the next one. So up next, we have a $10 donation from John V, who says, at the Enforcer and Matt, John Villamore, Air Force vet, crypto lingo. Great job, guys. Best OSINT, a channel out there. Keep up the good work.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do think we are OSINT level. Of course, that's a high honor, considering that you're giving us that title and you have been in the military before. And it's good to know that we actually do get a lot of validation from a lot of veterans out there, because we do have the occasional like armchair expert out there who comes through and they don't give any kind of credibility to themselves. They just say, you don't have a clue what you're talking about, and then they leave. So it's good to know that people with actual experience think I know what I'm talking about. That's, of course, a high honor to know, and it's good to know that what I say has some sense and reasoning in it. So with that, I thank you so much for the support once again, and with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from B. Baldy, who says, when this is over, will it be categorized as a special operation or a war, and why?
This will be classified as a war. The United States didn't actually go into Vietnam and declare war, but it is called a war here. That's because, of course, we pretty much fought it like a war. And, so that kind of qualifies as a war. So in the future, we will probably call this the Ukraine war because this is no military operation. This is this is a full-on invasion of their country. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question, at least in brief. And with that being said, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Murray Sutherland, who says, came into the conversation at what people can do, volunteer, etc. If you have money, I suggest you make regular donations to the Red Cross, Ukraine Central Bank, etc. Ukraine has lost a lot of its tax base, not glory, but they need money.
That's true. I entirely agree. And we're actually trying to find out, because someone did send me an EIN number, and I'm still trying to check it out with the GuideStar system, if the American United 24 organization can accept donations. And if it can, that's what tomorrow's fundraiser is going to be. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does help out some people with some ideas of what they could do. And with that being said, thank you so much, and we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have another $10 donation from Raphael Schneeves, who says, thank you for taking my idea seriously. I am quite interested in naval history. I'm also planning on joining either the Corps or the Navy as an officer. Who knows, maybe one day I'll join the Ukrainian Legion.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I try and take everything seriously as much as possible. Of course, there is always, every once in a while, one that kind of, super chat here and there, and I don't want to sound like I'm rude or anything, but it does kind of brush me sometimes as offensive. Like, we had one last night where someone said, oh man, you're not going to cover Popasna, like it's so important, and I had just covered it like 10 minutes before that super chat came in, and sometimes, like with that, I can't take that seriously because it's like, number one, why are you coming in here not knowing what I'm talking about? Number two, why are you trying to like attack me and act like I'm an idiot or something when I just covered it? So sometimes I don't take things seriously, but by and large, I try and take everything seriously. And of course, I think that goodwill people like yourself who wanted to help out Ukraine as much as possible should have their, queries and statements taken very seriously. So I thank you very much for the support, and no problem at all. I try and answer everything and be of service as much as possible in this war and delivering the news and answering people's questions if I can. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have another $10 donation from BC Skyman, who says, do you believe that the global military support to Ukraine will continue if the war is drawn out over several years?
It would have to. If Western aid stopped flowing in eventually, Ukraine would eventually collapse. They don't have the supply base themselves to manufacture enough arms they need to carry on this war, and so down the line in the future, they're most likely going to rely on almost nothing but Western equipment. So I hope that does answer the question, and I do thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And next, we have one from Larry Pickett, who puts in a $10 donation and says, Enforcer, did you know a security company used by our government is paying their workers ex-vets in Ukraine $1,000 a day? No lie, if I was younger, I would definitely go.
I didn't actually know that, and I think that is a very interesting thing if true. I don't really know which one you're talking about. I know it isn't Blackwater. I think Blackwater got in a lot of trouble, and then they reorganized into a new name, mercenary company. So I'm not really sure who it is, but that is something interesting to hear. Of course, they probably only recruit from former veterans. That's usually how private military PMCs work. So I thank you very much for the support, and that's some very interesting info. I did not know that. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have an $8 donation from Yahweh, who says, one of the main reasons for the shortage in baby formula everywhere is access to sunflower oil, with Ukraine being the major producer. And real quick, Enforcer, before you answer that, I'm not sure if that's totally accurate. I think there might be actually other reasons for that, but that's just my take on it.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. Matthew's take is somewhat correct. I'm not really sure if sunflower oil is sunflower oil, and I don't want to say anything uneducated, so we'll just pull it up. In baby formula. Infant formulas typically incorporate a blend of vegetable oils as their primary source of fatty acids. Palm, sunflower, safflower, and rapeseed oil are most common vegetable oils used in baby formula, although coconut and soy are also used. Ew, soy. I'm not a big fan of the flavor of soy, except for soy sauce. Soy sauce is good, and it's only good on particular food, usually like Chinese food, but I'm just not a big fan of soy. But anyways, let me think. Let me think here. Where was I going with that? While it is part of the ingredient, this war has been going on long enough for that supply chain to be impacted like that quickly. Usually there's a reserve of food in every single category that will last about 6 months if food production was to halt completely. So considering that this war has been going on for 3 months, that 6-month period hasn't really occurred yet for these kind of supply shortages to happen. And we know that they're not happening everywhere because we know that there's baby formula being shipped over from Canada into the United States because they're not having the same shortages. Those shortages are kind of caused by some internal domestic issues here in the United States due to some shortages of certain kinds of food productions and processing that has led to that shortage. So I thank you very much for the support. That may be a contributing factor, but I don't think that is the necessarily major factor. But I do thank you very much for the support and also the little tidbit of information there. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And real quick, I just want to say that one of the viewers, T Truth, said in February, Abbott Laboratories, maker of popular baby formula, closed a factory in Sturgis, Michigan. And yes, I wasn't going to go into that level of detail, but that was part of the reason I was thinking in my mind why we're having the shortage, in addition to, issues with COVID, the workforce, etc. But yeah, I think there's mainly other reasons rather than the one that was mentioned in that chat. But anyways, moving on to the next one, we have an $8 donation from Zyper Sniper 1 again, who says, that video of the last day in Azovstal looks like a trailer to a war or zombie movie. Damn, war is crazy scary.
It is crazy scary, and that's something that I think can never be overstated, is that a lot of everyone, including me, everyone always wants to imagine that we'll be heroes and overzealous, but whenever I see stuff like that and also firefights occurring, I'm like, man, would I freeze up and get scared? Because I've never really been in a situation like that, of course. And so, like, you never really know the answer. Why is there a mosquito in here? But you never really know the answer to that question until you're actually there. And I've heard a lot of veterans say that. And usually it's the veterans who are, at least in my experience, who are a lot more quiet about what they did in the military. That actually did something. I knew a guy at some point. He's dead now, so I'll just say his name. His name was Bill, and Bill was an incredibly nice fella. He was the nicest man you'd ever met. He went above and beyond. He was a great friend of mine. But he was old enough to have served in Vietnam in the Air Force as an electrician. Surprisingly enough, somehow being an electrician in the Air Force, he actually got into a lot of firefights. And one thing that I started to find out as I got to know him more and more is that Bill killed a lot of people. Bill nearly killed everyone you could imagine, in his time in Vietnam. And what was crazy to me is that he did not act like that at all. He wasn't one of those people, had to drink like piss and vinegar and act all macho and stuff to prove his point. He was the nicest man you'd ever imagine to have met. And this guy probably killed like 20 people, which was interesting to me. And then, every once in a while, you go wandering around and you meet like a veteran, and they'll be like sitting there like spitting into a cup, what you want, and you'll be like, oh yeah, blah blah blah. You'll be trying to chit chat with them, and they're trying to keep up like this persona, and then you'll be like, okay, so what you do? I was a janitor in the Air Force. You'll be like, what? That's always interesting to me, is that the people who act, like, as far as my experience goes, and of course this isn't discrediting any vets who go out of this, but as far as my kind of like experience has gone, the veterans who act super macho didn't really do a lot, and the veterans who were super nice, just overly nice and very polite, great people, usually saw some unseeable, like unbelievable stuff. And that's interesting to me, and that kind of weighs back into how people react to wars and stuff. I wouldn't know how I'd react to it, honestly. But I would hope that, I'd be able to manage at least and not seize up and freak out or anything. But I thank you so much for the support. And yes, war is a very scary thing. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $6 donation from Junebug, who does not leave a comment. Thank you very much, Junebug, for that donation. We appreciate it very much. And moving on, we have a $6 donation from William Devereux, who says, Red Dawn should be a sub-tier. Where will new tanks be deployed, and how effective do you think they'll be? Thank you for keeping us informed, and glory to the heroes.
And glory to the heroes, and I thank you very much for the support. Could you reread that one to me one more time? I need to try and wrap my head around that one.
So he's talking about making Red Dawn a sub tier. So I think he means like a membership or something like that.
Huh. That's an interesting idea. I don't want to do memberships because I kind of feel like memberships kind of seem a little too commercialized. It's kind of weird. People will have little highlighted names and stuff. And while it's nice to make people feel special and stuff and recognize their, regular donors, they have to start, it kind of feels like we're going into like the video game channel direction there. But I will think about it. Actually, Matthew, let's run a poll and let's see if people would be willing to have memberships or not. Because if they were, I mean, like, why not? Have memberships, I guess. So we'll run a poll on that and see what everyone thinks. And if so, we may make that one of the membership ranks once we get around to that here in the future. And also, I've been seeing some stuff in the live chat. That's very interesting. A lot of people talking about their service, and we had Beeps and Eats finding food and treasure say most vets don't talk about it. There's nothing glorious about taking another soldier's life. It's just survival. And I have to agree. While we sit here on this channel and of course we talk about it's great to see Russian soldiers being wiped out and vehicles destroyed and stuff, when you really think about it, it's going to affect people later on. Of course, I've always heard that it never really affects people immediately. Like when they shoot someone, it's never like, oh my God, I just killed someone. It's always something that occurs to them weeks later, and they're like, wow, that guy had a family, and probably and stuff like that. And then that's when the PTSD starts to kick in, from what I've been told from the veterans I've talked to. And Bill didn't actually talk about any of his experiences in Vietnam. And I had known he had served in Vietnam, but he didn't actually tell me about any of that stuff until I bought this game, because he had Parkinson's and he was dying at that time, and he was a cool guy. I mean, like, he was my next door neighbor, really cool. And so I wanted to play a game with him. I thought, well, I didn't think about PTSD at the time at this, so please don't judge me for this. But I thought, wouldn't that be cool if I got a Vietnam War game? And I was much younger then, too. It was many years younger. I thought if I got a Vietnam War game, I could play the VC, and I could play them poorly, and he could just beat the VC every time. I was like, that'd be really cool. Maybe that'd be like some kind of therapy for him. And so I bought the map. And what I didn't know is that the map that I had bought for this war game, by the way, it's called Silver Bayonet if you all want to take a look at it. He actually got stationed at Camp Holloway. And he had lost a lot of his friends in that area. A lot of his friends got killed. He ended up killing a lot of people heading to Cambodia. And so when I pulled out this map for this war game and laid it out in front of him, he started telling all these stories. He was like, 3 guys got killed here at the tea plantation. Another 2 guys got killed here. We usually set up the listening post somewhere over here if this was an actual map. And I was like, I was very interested in these stories. And I never showed it to him again because I actually heard that he didn't have a good night's sleeping that night, and I felt terrible after that. I didn't actually think that would be an effect, so I never showed him the game again. But that was the only way I actually heard about his stories. And also, he told me a lot of things that he never told his family, and that was something I've got told at his funeral by all of his family members. They're like, he got closer to you than anyone else, and he told you all these stories he never told any of us. And I was like, I was very honored about that, and I thought that we were great friends, So with that, I have to say that a lot of people don't talk about it, and usually the ones who went through a lot don't ever really say anything about it, and they're very nice people. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And real quick, Enforcer, on that poll, it looks like a overwhelming majority of people do not want channel memberships, and I can agree with that because I think the memberships would probably cheapen the appearance of the channel.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it look too commercialized because while we do take super chats, we of course always recognize everyone. I feel like that's going in the direction of kind of commercializing this a little bit too much. Of course I do have to make a living doing this stuff, but I don't want to, make it go in that direction. So I thank y'all all for voting and letting y'all's opinions be heard on that. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Walker Scott, who says, it took me 82 days to figure out my new phone and super chat. I think I finally figured it out.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and it's good to know that you figured out how to work the phones. Of course, I'm always annoyed whenever anything happens with phones. I don't know if this is like something that all of y'all experience, but iPhone just updated, and they've changed the interface with how the iPhone works, and I absolutely hate it now. It's not right. And then, that's also annoying switching in between Androids and iPhones is that they have different modes of operation, and then you have to try and relearn that stuff, and that kind of annoys me a little bit. But I understand where you're coming from completely with that, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Kevin Scott 72, who says, Enforcer, here's some Morse code for you. ...
Well, thank you very much for your support, and I'm glad that a lot of people like the Morse. I haven't been able to change the code out lately just because I haven't had enough time to actually go through and try and encode the thing. And I was actually thinking about maybe reaching out to one of y'all who has actually had experience with encryption and kind of making y'all the encoder, which is kind of like an play on like the enforcer like naming series, and maybe making y'all the people who would do my encoding, and then I put that up on the stream and have that played. And so someone who actually has experience doing this encoding stuff could do it a lot quicker than me and change up the messages a lot more frequently. I'm not really sure about that, but if anyone would be interested in helping me out with doing that, reach out to me over Discord in my DMs, and I will look at it, and we'll see about working that out and seeing about getting a little Morse code message as a neat little puzzle for everyone. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a visit from Jason Bourne. He puts in a $5 donation and says Ukrainians already have several battalions built around dozens of captured Russian BMP-3 IFVs.
Well, that's very interesting here. I'm not really sure about that. Of course, I've never been able to verify that information myself or ask Starsky about it, which is like my primary source of information sometimes. But I will make sure to look into that, and I wouldn't doubt it, honestly, because we've seen them capturing loads of vehicles, and so I don't feel like that'd be too far-fetched. And so I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the question. And with that being said, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have another $10 donation from DJ Bonebreaker, who says, I had a granduncle who recently passed away from Parkinson's, who served in Vietnam, and he was never willing to tell me about any of his experiences until after I came back from the Navy and OEF and OIF. And DJ Bonebreaker, sorry for your loss.
And I'm sorry about that as well. I thank you very much for the support, and it's of course always unfortunate to hear that you had a family member who passed away recently. Of course, it's always sad. And, everyone has to always live through, but it's never something that's ever fun to do. And I understand that completely. We've had family members die recently as well, and it always hurts a little bit. But to answer that question, to address the comment in a way, what's interesting to me is that I've never had military experience, but I've never had a problem with having vets tell me their experiences, and that's really interesting to me. I don't know what it is, but like I've always heard stories that no one else ever hears from veterans, and people and like family members and stuff will be like, they've never told us those stories. I don't know what it is, but for some reason veterans feel compelled to tell me stories that they don't tell anyone else. And so I'm growing up, I got a lot of insight on things that they never told anyone else. And so I would sit there and be like, oh, like most of it's boring. That's like one thing I got from the start. There's almost nothing that ever happens, but when something does happen, it's traumatic and it's terrifying. That's one thing I learned off the start. And of course that circles around the internet a little bit more now than it did when I was growing up. But that's something that, and there's a whole bunch of interesting stories to me that are just really cool. Like, for example, Bill never actually hung out on a beach, because whenever you look at the Vietnam War movies, whenever the soldiers get a break, they're always at the beach and they have like beers and they're cooking up hot dogs and stuff. Bill never had any of that. He actually got transported from Camp Holloway to some kind of barracks ship out at sea, and they hung out on the ship for a little while, and then they got airlifted back up off the ship and then back to Camp Holloway, which was really interesting to me because I didn't know that was something that they did. And he shared all kinds of stories with me that was crazy, and he actually said that fragging was a normal thing. Like, he didn't say it was normal. He said it did happen, though. He said it never happened with his unit. And then he told me stories, everyone always has the stories about the first lieutenants, that's always like the fear of everyone as an idiot first lieutenant. And so I heard a lot of his stories about first lieutenants that would come through and they call in like an airstrike right on top of them. Unintentionally or intentionally, and then he'd call it off, and then he'd go back to the base and be like, you gotta get this guy out of here, he's crazy. And I've heard all kinds of stories from him and others, and it's always interesting to hear because it always gives a perspective on what actually happens out there that no one really hears about. And a lot of it's just really mundane, and that's the most interesting part about veteran stories is the mundane parts. Everyone always wants to hear about the firefight, but you never want to hear about the time that they just sat there for 24 hours with absolutely nothing to do, and they got so bored that like they threw a rock down a hill and like caused a landslide or something. Like no one ever hears like the mundane stories, and that's something I always focus on. It's just like the average daily lives of what they went through, and then they end up telling me the other stories on top of that. So it's always interesting, and I do thank you very much for the support, and I'm sorry to hear about your loss again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Sandra Mendoza, who says, thank you.
And I thank you very much for the support. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Lucent, who says, M777A2 command computers require black keys and filing device, extending Ukraine into our military satellites, potentially compromising U.S. security.
Interesting. I thank you very much for the support, and I thank you for providing an answer as to why those computers may not be sent over with the M777s. That's very interesting to know. I did not actually know that, and so that may be the reason why those aren't being sent over. So I thank you very much for the support, and with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Tim Swenson, who says, any news on Turkey getting what they want to let Finland in? And if not, is that good or bad?
I haven't heard any news about it. Of course, a lot of that may be backdoor negotiations, so we may not ever get any news on it. It's I kind of feel like the situation they're under is kind of like the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the United States silently pulled the nuclear units out of Turkey that they used to have there. In exchange, the Soviets pulled their nuclear units out of Cuba. I kind of feel like that's what's going to happen here. Is that's going to be very quiet, whatever happens, and Turkey then will probably support the vote to get Sweden in. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way. There's not a lot of information on that right now as of the moment, so there's not really much I can work off of, but I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from BSG Wolf, who says, end of Vietnam was marked by fall of Saigon in April 30th, 1975. I actually saw the Hueys lift off on TV.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and that's always cool to hear, is that you were actually around when history was being made, because I remember that was like one of the last things we'd always cover in school is Vietnam. We never made it to 9/11. Like 9/11 was always like a side note. Like you would come in on the last day of school and they'd be like, all right, let's go through the 70s to the present day. So Soviet Union fell apart, 9/11, here we are. All right, have fun, everyone. And so we never really went over that a lot, but Vietnam was one of the last things we would. And they always loved to show the evacuation of the U.S. Embassy in Saigon, which is now called Ho Chi Minh City. So I thank you very much for the support, and I thank you for sharing that little interesting story with us. It's always cool to hear everyone's stories. That's one thing I love to hear is what people's life experiences are like. And maybe I'll make a video series like that in the future, although I think people would be scared to tell their life stories to someone in a World War I uniform with a gas mask on, but we'll see. So I thank you very much for the support, and with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Suzanne B., who says, thank you, gentlemen. I'm so excited for tomorrow's guest. It will be interesting.
It certainly will be interesting. Hopefully we can get a lot of people in here and a lot of support. That's the thing I'm all for on Sundays. And people can say that's greedy or what. I don't know how it could be greedy because I'm not getting a single dime of that. That's all going to Ukraine. But my whole entire goal on Sundays is to get as many people on the stream as possible and as many people donating as possible. That's like my whole entire goal on Sundays. I want to get as much support to Ukraine as possible, any way I can. And so I hope a lot of people respect that goal. I know that there's going to be someone out there who says, oh, he's so greedy, scammer, or something like that. But it's not, like, there's no scam. I've explained it a million times how it works. There's no way I even touch the money. I'm just trying to get as much support to Ukraine as possible. And I think that is a huge bragging right for us all that we're all willing to help out that much. And so I thank you very much for the support once again. And I can't wait for tomorrow either. And so with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from ASEOPVA, who does not leave a comment, but we appreciate your support very much. And up next, we have another $5 donation from Monsieur Lunchtime, who says, the guys in Popasna are waiting for me to finish my meat rolls. I'm not sure what that is, but anyways, I hope the U.S. Doesn't include lots of logistics trucks in their new aid package.
Interesting. Well, I thank you very much for the support, Monsieur Lunchtime, and it is, of course, interesting to hear that you are in the area of Popasna. That may be why the breakthroughs happened, is because you just tripped and fell, and there was a large earthquake that happened in the area, and so the units had to withdraw. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comment in a way. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $12 donation from Private Lunchtime again, who says, my grandfather fought in Burma, World War II, and in a Gurkha regiment. Very rare for a British soldier. Saw horrible jungle action and never spoke about it till my uncle found his medals and mentions in military histories. Brave men don't crow.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and it's really interesting to hear that you actually have a, I guess you could call him an ancestor, not really a relative, I guess would be a better description of it, that was actually in a Gurkha regiment. The Gurkhas are one of the most elite fighting forces that the British Army still fields, and to be a Gurkha, you have to come from Nepal. Which is a very interesting, like, historical thing. But still, that's wild to hear that you actually had a Gurkha relative that fought in Burma. Of course, no one really talks about the fighting that occurred in Burma, although it was very fierce and brutal, and there's terrible stories, historically even, that come out about the fights that occurred within Burma itself. So I thank you very much for the support, and that's really interesting to hear that you did have a family member that served there. And of course, brave men don't really talk about what they did. And that's something always interesting to me, is that whenever you look at the huge war heroes, like Sergeant York and Audie Murphy, they didn't really talk about their experiences much. Specifically, Sergeant York, Alvin York, the World War I hero, he came home and he never profited off of his fame for being a war hero once. And the only time he did it so that way he could build a Christian school in his hometown. His hometown's actually not far from where I live. It's in Tennessee, and it's up near Pall Mall, if y'all know where that is. So let me try and find it. Pall Mall. Where's Pall Mall? It's like north of Nashville, I think. No, it's over here. Yeah, there it is. Pall Mall, right here. And you see the Sergeant Alvin C. York State Historic Park, and that's where he's from. So really cool guy, and a lot of the brave heroes don't really talk about it much. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And Enforcer, we have just 8 super chats left, and it is getting pretty late. Would you like to go ahead and put a cutoff on the super chat so we can get to the live chats?
Unfortunately, we will have to. So we're going to have to put a cutoff on the super chats for tonight. If you do put in one beyond this, we won't be able to answer it, and I'm sorry about that. But if you would like to support these streams, forget supporting the channel. Just come here tomorrow and support the fundraiser. I find that to be a lot more beneficial than supporting me tonight. So I thank everyone once again who has put in support. We will answer everyone's questions that they put in a super chat, and then we're going to answer some questions from the live chat. And so with that, on to the next question.
So up next, let me recognize a few donations here without comments. We have a $5 donation from Sweet Walt, a $5 donation from WL. We also have a $4 donation from Junebug72 and a $4 donation from the Mr. Derp. Thank you all for your support of the channel. Even though you don't leave comments, we appreciate it very much. And let's check something here. Okay, and up next we have a $5 donation from Diffuse56, who says, "Have a good evening, guys. Thanks for another educational and engaging experience."
And I thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy these streams. I try and put a lot of effort, honestly, trying to pretty much put my heart and soul into this thing, so it's good to know that there are a lot of people out there who do appreciate the effort. And so I thank you so much for the support once again. And with that, we're on to the next question.
All right, and up next we have a $5 donation from Binary Brute, who says, "Thank you for the stream and information you have provided. Would you have an idea if Ukraine is going to push into Mariupol to take back the area?"
Ooh, that's something I can't really talk about all too well, because that could be giving away Ukrainian plans as a whole. So I can't really tell you if that is or isn't going to happen. But with that, I do thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Odin, who says, "The U.S. has been working on self-propelled howitzers with a 75-kilometer range. Why couldn't we send some of these?"
I think that maybe because they're new, and usually you send the older equipment in support first before you send the new stuff. New stuff is usually relegated to your own military. That's why usually whenever you see the United States sending over F-16s to foreign countries or any of their weapons, they're always sending the older, less capable versions instead of their newer versions, because that could be giving away confidential secrets that give our military a cutting edge over the rest. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer your question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And moving on, we have a $5 donation from Dad Good, who says, "If Putin is gone, will the war end or continue or possibly get worse?"
I believe if Putin is gone, the war would continue for some while, but it would most likely start to simmer out, because the person who came in would have to go. We're going to have to avenge him, and so they would of course keep the war going for that. But after a while, of course, the situation would be unattainable, and then they would say, okay, we have to quit. So I think that would most likely be the direction it would go down. But then again, that's just my opinion on it, and I could be wrong. There's really no way to know which direction that would head in. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And moving on, we have a $4 donation from Simon Shorthouse, who says, I am from Australia, therefore I cannot donate to your fundraiser, so I donate to Operator Starsky's PayPal, and he uses the money to buy items for the troops.
Yes, that is true. That's a great way to support Operator Starsky. He actually has a PayPal on his channel, and so if y'all would like to support Operator Starsky, y'all can send money through his PayPal account, and he uses that to buy equipment and gear for his unit. And there's also other units in the Ukrainian army, you could probably ask him for it, that also have PayPals, and they use those PayPal accounts to buy equipment that they need if they're ever running short on something. So if you would like to actually support the fighting units, which is something I can't do through YouTube Give, go over there to Operator Starsky and put a little bit of money in his PayPal. It would help him out. It would help out his unit a lot as well. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support and sharing that with everyone. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And moving on, we have a $4 donation from Minna Stena, who says, do you know what kind of training NATO gave the Ukrainian military specifically, and which countries it was that trained Ukraine?
Mostly it was the United States. I believe that the Germans, the British, and maybe the French a little helped out in the training of the Ukrainians. But it wasn't any kind of special training. They weren't like teaching them the dojo or anything. They were just teaching them standard Western doctrine. The Western nations fight in an entirely different way, and their military is organized in an entirely different structure than the Russians, which is what I call Eastern military doctrine. And so all the West did was come in and say, okay, clean the slate, get rid of all of the Eastern doctrines, we'll go with Western doctrine, and then they taught them how to fight off of that. So it's the basic stuff that we do here in the United States, like the combined arms efforts, how to communicate with each other, how to organize the formations of the squads, the platoons, the companies, and on beyond that. And that's really all we taught them. It wasn't anything special, it wasn't anything unique, it was just standard Western doctrine, which goes a long way. And you can see how much better that doctrine is over Russian doctrine. And considering that we've seen East versus Western doctrines go head to head now, and we can see that Western doctrines are superior, much like all of history before it, Western doctrine will become the standard doctrine around the world within a few decades time, and then everyone will start racing. Most likely Western countries will be spearheading that, a new doctrine that will be able to outdo the current Western doctrine. And so I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $2 donation from the Beezer, who says, sorry, y'all. I spoke too quick. I stand corrected.
Oh, it's fine. And thank you very much for the support. It's perfectly okay. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $2 donation from C.A. Lags, who says, Mr. Lunchtime is VDV as a balloon.
Oh man, I thank you very much for the support. I think Mr. Lunchtime couldn't be a member of the VDV because if he ever tried to hop out of a airplane with a parachute, he would never actually deploy the parachute. He would just use the thing as like a bib, so that way he could like eat the rest of his paratroopers. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that answers the comment. And with that being said, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a actually the final super chat of the night goes to Kevin Scott 72, who puts in a $2 donation and says, watching the Mr. Lunchtime channel, cooking channel.
Well, thank you very much for the support. Good joke. I like that one. And I haven't heard that one. That one's new. So everyone go check out the Mr. Lunchtime cooking channel. There isn't one, just, being serious, but still, I love that joke. And thank you so much for sharing it with us. And with that, we've reached the end of the super chats for tonight. Once again, there is a cutoff right now, so if you do send in a super chat, we unfortunately won't be able to answer it because we would like to get to some live chat questions and spread a little bit of love and also answer some questions of the people who are just here enjoying the stream. And so with that, on to the live chat questions.
So first up from the live chat questions, we have a question from Pakatang, who says, Enforcer, could Elon Musk use Starlink to reach the Russian people to help bring about regime change in that country? I don't think Russians would refuse to use free internet.
I think it would be pretty tough to do because you would first have to get the Starlink dishes inside of Russia, which the Russians would probably outright refuse, or if they were ever set up, the authorities would confiscate them and destroy them. So unfortunately, I don't think that would be a possibility. So I hope that addresses the question, at least in my opinion. I could be wrong, it may actually succeed, but I think the Russians would be on the ball there and most likely crush that before it ever had the chance to spread any meaningful information. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Connie Presley, who says, Enforcer, why doesn't Ukraine go inside Russia and blow up their bases?
Why doesn't Ukraine go into Russia and blow up their bases?
Yes.
They have. It's just that actually marching in would be a massive ordeal, and it would lead to a lot of political complications. But they have reached out and touched Russian bases within Russia. They've hit them in Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod, and blown up the army armories there about twice in Kursk, and I think once in both Belgorod and Bryansk. So I hope that answers the question. They're not ever going to send soldiers into Russia. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but they will definitely shoot cruise missiles and ballistic missiles into Russia and hit the bases that way. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does, well, not the support. I thank you very much for the question. I hope that does answer it, and we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have, this isn't really a question, more of a statement from Khan Azur, who says, I think I know why the Russians use red for their color. It's because all of their equipment is covered in rust.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, that's a pretty good one. I like that. So I thank you very much for the joke. Actually, that's pretty true, honestly. Russian tanks are old, dingy, and dirty. And they really, well, there's really no way for them to do that. Their economy is bull. Like, if you actually pull up their economy, let's pull it up. Russian, well, actually, GDP per country, 2021. And of course, this is COVID numbers, so I think it did go down. But let's look at the rankings of every country by GDP. Let's see. United States, up at the top, 20.5 trillion in a year. China at 13.4 trillion. What's crazy is that we consider the Chinese an actual rival to the United States, but their economic power is only around 60% of the United States. Very interesting. Japan is number 3 with an economy of, GDP of almost 5 trillion. So they're about like a little under half the size of China. Germany has 4 trillion, by far the richest country in Europe. The United Kingdom has 2.83 trillion. While the United Kingdom doesn't have as large of a GDP as Germany, they do have a larger and more powerful military, I would say, at this point. Although the Germans are upping their budget again. So, I think that'll be changing soon. France has a GDP just below Britain's of 2.78. India, 2.72 trillion. Look at that. The Indians are actually now competing with some of the Western European countries in terms of GDP, but they really have a long ways to go because they have to account for 1 billion people living in their country. So the actual GDP per capita is still pretty low. Italy is 2.07. Brazil is 1.87, and Canada is 1.71. You notice that Russia isn't in the top 10? Isn't that a little funny? Maybe we can find a list that actually shows them all from top to bottom. Looks like Wikipedia's got one. Russia, according to this graph, is number 11 at 1.8. And we know that their economy has shrunk drastically during these sanctions. It's down to around, I think, 1.3. And so if you go down that low, they're below Indonesia and they're just above Saudi Arabia. So their economy is like nothing. So I hope that answers the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Happy Dragon, who says, if Russia wins the war, unlikely, but just if, would Russia still be investigated for war crimes?
Yes, they would by Western countries, but there wouldn't really be anything they could do against Russia because there's no way they can just walk into Russia and arrest them. So I hope that answers the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have another question from Pakatang, who says, Enforcer, what would be the essential infrastructure within Russia for saboteurs to target to force Russia to pursue peace?
I think if these saboteurs targeted, say, if they target anything important like the Kremlin itself or a skyscraper full of civilians, that's only going to make them double down. So I think doing what they're doing now, but at a more frequent pace and causing more damage, will most likely be the way to lead this war to an end sooner. Because one always has to remember, if you commit like almost terrorist attacks, like on the Kremlin per se, like you throw a bomb at it, or if you like run a plane into a building, like a 9/11 style kind of thing, that's only going to piss people off even more. So you don't want to ever do that kind of stuff. You always want to make sure it leaves civilians in their harm out of the picture, and it's just attacking actual strategic targets of interest. So railroads, factories, and generally heavy industry would be the primary target. So I hope that answers that. And we're going to answer about 2 or 3 more, and then we're going to wrap up tonight's stream. And so with that, on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Gabby B, who says, I saw on Australian news today that Putin claims they destroyed a consignment of Western weapons being sent to Ukraine by missiles from the Black Sea. Is this true or propaganda?
It's most likely propaganda. You've got to remember that most of those missiles they're talking about and what they're hitting is Lviv, and most of the time we see them hitting like apartment buildings and electrical substations. We've never actually seen the missiles hit any actual supplies yet, or hit any kind of depot that then subsequently exploded because they had ammunition in it. So I think that mostly may be propaganda, and if they never back it up with a video showing that, or some kind of proof, you can generally assure yourself that it's fake. So I hope that answers the question, and on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Doc in Paradise, who says, Enforcer, I'm hearing sporadic rumors that say Ukrainians have accidentally bombed civilian homes. Is this true or propaganda?
They may have. I mean, like, the Ukrainians, of course, I'm pro-Ukrainian. The Ukrainians are the best country of the two, and they are the winning side right now. But of course, there is always the room for accidents in every single military. The United States has never gone a war without accidentally killing a civilian or attacking civilian infrastructure here and there. And so that may be the case, but I've never heard any particular incidents about it. If you're kind of like qualifying that artillery barrage we saw in film where the artillery was landing around those civilian houses, the mansions where the tanks were, then yeah, that would qualify. But when you really look at it, they're attacking military targets around these houses. So it's kind of a gray area. I don't really know, but I would feel like the Ukrainians have probably done that at one point or another, because they're not going to be perfect every single time, and they will slip up and make a mistake here and there because it's only human. So I hope that answers the question, and with that, we're on to the last question for the night. And so, what is the last question? Who's the lucky last person?
So the last question of the night goes to the Beezer, who says, Enforcer, what do you think China is up to in regards to utilizing the Ukraine conflict?
China's up to nothing. They've completely backed out of everything. They're not really doing a lot that they've done. They're not doing a lot extra in terms of the Taiwan situation. They're kind of keeping status quo with that. They're not backing the Russians. They're not supplying the Russians with anything. We don't have any evidence of that. And so they're just kind of sitting over here and minding their own business. You have to remember again that they're going through a COVID pandemic over there, pretty large again. And so that of course is something they are trying to weigh into consideration. And also another thing is that they've seen how bad the economic sanctions have impacted Russia, and they know if they did anything, there would most likely be sanctions levied against them just like that. And it would be a pretty tough time for them, because that's really the only way their economy grows is through exports. So I don't think they'll be taking advantage of any part of this situation, and they'll largely be staying neutral. Of course, they'll make it known what they believe in, but they're going to stay neutral as far as their actions. And so I hope that answers the question. And with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for watching. If you have watched all the way through and you are a new viewer, then you are a trooper. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. These streams do run every single night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays. And we also upload a summary daily of the day's events and some of the interesting videos that have come out of it. Also, I would like to say that tomorrow is the Sunday fundraiser. We will be having Funker 530, Ronnie Fit from Funker 530, and Operator Starsky on at the same time. It's going to be the biggest Sunday live stream that we've ever done, and so I hope y'all all turn out and support the fundraiser as much as you can. It's going to be the last large fundraiser we do, and then we're going to roll back our goals over the next few weeks and make them much smaller, so that way a lot of people can have time to recuperate their finances, because some people are saying that they're feeling pressured, and I don't want people to feel pressured. And so we'll roll back the goals after this last one, but I want to go out with a big bang before we go into the smaller goals for a bit. And so with that, I thank you all once again for coming. I thank you all for supporting the channel, and I hope you did find something worthy and informational out of this news. So thank you all, and I hope you all have a great night. Stay safe and take care.